Good evening and welcome to the Selectmen's meeting for Tuesday, April 12th. The agenda this evening, 6 o'clock, will be the Town Hall building project. 6:45, Chief O'Leary will discuss warrant articles 20 and 21, and we will talk about the town meeting warrant itself. 7:05, public hearing for the 2011 NCAA men's lacrosse quarterfinals at Gillette Stadium. 7:30, public hearing for Kenny Chesney and Zach Brown Band at Gillette Stadium. 7:40, a public hearing, liquor violations at Waxy O'Connor's. 8:50, the town manager will go over the update to the budget. 9:10, the Board of Selectmen will vote regarding the pre-65 retiree health insurance. 9:30, we'll go into executive session with the Water and Sewer Commissioners to discuss real property negotiations and review of executive session minutes. Would you lead us in the pledge book?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks. Okay. Hi, Randy.
Hi, good evening. So we're here tonight to talk to you about the Town Hall project. Thank you very much for moving your schedule a little bit to get us early, and I apologize. I'll be leaving at 6:15 to watch my daughter's Corpalooza at the high school auditorium. She's got a solo at 6:30.
Great.
But you'll be in good hands when I'm done with KBA, Joe and Mike, and representatives from the building committee. I'm going to take you right to the punchline within the first 5 minutes. I've handed out some handouts to you just now. Many services for all at your new town hall. It's a little bit difficult with a building that provides so many services in so many different ways to come up with a tagline that a single service provider does, like due for renewal at the library. We're kind of jealous of that one, or the schools, or public safety. As you can see, there are many services, I know as this group knows, that are provided out of this building: inspections, planning, conservation, Board of Health, town clerk, veterans, administration, Board of Selectmen office, assessing, finance, accounting, and collector treasurer. So there's a lot that goes on in this building, and many services. The building is actually 48 years old. It's circa 1963. It was recommended for renovation 12 years ago by the Space Needs Committee at the 1999 town meeting. And the problems existing in 1999 still exist today, all of them, and some are now worse. Just wanted to highlight some of the major building issues, which is sort of the primary reason we're sitting here today, is because the building has become unworkable. There's lead contamination, there's asbestos issues, there are moisture problems, or as Gabby in the planning department refers to a wall down on the first floor that's the weeping wall. There are drainage issues. The mechanical system issues, the heating system malfunctions. It's now ripe for another $1,000 repair. There are bathroom plumbing issues. There's no cooling system. There are electrical code issues. The service is insufficient to handle the load. It's an energy wasteful building. It's not seismically stable, and if we were to do anything with the building, that's a requirement now. The roof is failing. There are leaks in offices when it rains. Or even in this room here. There are accessibility issues that are ADA related. It's not fire protected. There's no sprinkler system. It's not a secure building. And there's a lack of meeting rooms, which creates space and scheduling issues, and there's insufficient storage. So what your board did in September of last year is, acknowledging all this, you authorized the hiring of architects and engineers and cost estimators to study the feasibility options of renovating or rebuilding the town hall. So the town's school and permanent municipal building committee appointed a subcommittee to review proposals and select a firm to do this work. And in October, Castle Booz Associates, KBA, a municipal facilities planning firm, was selected. And tonight we have Joe and Mike from KBA who will walk us through their work. But over the last 5 months, they've been hard at work. They met with all the departments to determine the program needs for all the departments. Evaluated the building and the site, developed and refined several concept drawings, with the subcommittee and department heads, developed multiple options, and costed them out. And the punchline is that there are two options that they're going to walk you through tonight. One is an addition renovation option, so it's sticking with the existing structure, but because this structure doesn't accommodate all of the program needs, it would have to be an addition to it, bringing it up to 21,000 square feet. And the estimated cost of that building is $7.88 million. And the other alternate option, which is a new building option, which they'll also walk through, is a smaller footprint. It's 4,000 square feet smaller. It's 17,000 square feet because you're starting from scratch. It's more efficient. That's got an estimated cost of almost the same as an addition renovation for reasons they'll explain, about $7.97 million, so within $100,000 to build new. And that was the unanimous recommendation by the building committee when they vetted KBA's results. One other point that I wanted to speak to, I would have done this at the end, but with my schedule, I wanted to just jump right to this before turning it over to KBA or taking questions, is the funding plan. All along, whenever we've talked about addressing this building, we've talked about trying to do it without a debt exclusion, without raising taxes. Which is how the library is being done, it's how the public safety building was done, and it's how the majority of the school projects have been done. So what we've been trying to do is cobble together the resources that would allow us to do this project within the town's included debt service budget. So excluded means taxes are raised and people pay taxes over and above. Included, we have included debt projects. But the last one we did was Mill Street, $1.5 million to acquire the Mill Street property. And then it's been a long time since we've done something major. There's been some small tuck-ins when we've had some capital needs and we didn't have money to buy like fire engines. But that's been the included debt service has been falling off. We've been paying it off, and so there's been some room that's been created. So with that as the thought process, the four funding sources that are being recommended here to fund this project, if it were to be approved, would be the capital stabilization account, which has $547,000 in it, which is something that we had, since we established it, we had been earmarking it for a project like this, something that would allow us to do something significant that would impact the taxpayer, meaning not raising taxes, and that's why we're trotting it out now to make that available for this project. And working with Bill Yukna, the chairman of the Permanent School Municipal Building Committee, who's obviously there managing the high school project. His estimate on the savings is approximately $1.7 million. Give or take, the project isn't complete yet. It won't be complete until school opens in the fall, and then there'll be a punch list, and then we've got to wait for the MSBA to finalize the reimbursement. So certainly we expect within 6 months after that process that we could have $1.7 million available to us from that project, which is consistent with what we've done with other projects in the past. When there's been a leftover remainder amount, we go back to town meeting, we vote those funds into the next major capital project, which is what we would recommend here. We wouldn't recommend voting these monies in until the project is complete. Then the other area which Selectman Brew has been working on, has been chairing the Town Asset Review Committee for some time, working with a good cross-section of folks who've been looking at all the town assets. And we've combed through and we've come up with a short list of assets that we believe could be monetized over the span of about 2 years, working with respective boards and committees as needed. There's only about 3 properties where that's required. The rest of the properties are tax possessions. We believe we could raise over $2 million in the sale of those assets, and we believe that's a very reasonable figure, which would leave a remainder of just under $3.7 million or $3,672,000 to be permanently financed. And bring us back to the total project costs of the new building of $7.97 million. And if we do better on the high school turnback or the sale of assets, or the project is successful as the high school project was, with the bidding, with the favorable bidding environment, we would hope we would do better than that. But this is a reasonable plan, and we believe that we can make that permanent financing over 20 years with what's going to roll off of the included debt service schedule over the next few years work within the resources that the town will have each year. That's the high view, and I was going to turn it over to Joe and Mike before I did that, if there are any general questions that the board might have.
So, we're not voting on anything tonight. This is just informational, right?
Right. It would be, in fairness, it would be good to get a consensus, because I don't think what we want to do is, there's an article on the town meeting, for the annual town meeting to support this project. And what we would like to do, and what I spoke to Bill Eugen about, is we would like to, even though we're not asking for a debt exclusion, we're not asking people to raise their taxes, we would like to go around to some groups and explain the need for the building and the project, and show them what's contemplated here. But we wouldn't do that if the consensus for the board is this is not a project that you want to support. So not necessarily looking for a vote tonight, but we're looking for a consensus that this is something that makes sense to go out and try to explain to people. But if it's not something that the board supports, we wouldn't want to do that, to be out of sync with the board.
Just a couple questions. I haven't seen any of the plans or the details, but my experience, when you see a large capital project come in front of the town, it goes through it's a ballot question, so you have a wider population voting yes or no before it gets to the warrant article. And I understand, maybe it's not tax dollars that's going to go into this, but there's a substantial amount of money that's coming from sale of property that could go into the budget that would not go in there now because it's going to this.
Couldn't go into the budget because the sale of these assets would have to go into other assets of the similar depreciable life. So it's one-time money. It's not something that could support an operating budget.
Okay. What would be the disadvantage of having it go to town, before it goes to town meeting, to be a ballot question, where you get a larger population looking at it, as we have done the other projects?
It's an unnecessary step. It's not required. We've missed the timeline to do that. And I think time is money. I think now is the time to get out and do the project, and the delay, I think, is just going to drive up the cost.
All right. No,
I
we
think
can go back. There's also a cost that you're going to not recognize if you wait and if you sell the properties now. It's substantially less than if you could do it in a couple of years.
We're not putting a date certain on when we would sell them. The intent is to use short-term financing for the next 2 and possibly 3 years. I mean, interest rates are really cheap. 1% money, and with issuance costs, you wouldn't get over 2. So the project is already making that assumption. So we could have potentially a 2-3 year window to monetize these assets, which I think is reasonable.
So there's a $2 million from the town assets and 3.6 that you're going to finance.
Permanently, that would be the estimated. Once the project is ready to be permanently bonded, that's the current estimate on what we would ultimately bond permanently.
Can you explain the Ahern school financing situation, how that worked? Because I think that's
sure. Yeah, the Ahern project, which was significantly larger than this, it was a $25 million project. I mean, that was all done with interim financing for many years with reimbursement, uncertain. For, I think 5 years. So we did interim financing on that for several years before we ultimately permanently financed our share. This is, the certainties here aren't as great as those with the Ahern, which was 3 times the size of this project.
Okay.
So it really is a timing thing to try and take advantage now of the good environment for bidding this type of project. There's no denying that the project needs to happen. And from a risk standpoint, how would you assess that?
I would say the longer we wait, the more it's going to cost. I mean, we've already waited several years, and the cost is a multiple of what we thought it was going to be 12 years ago. So, and the building's breaking. I mean, it's 48 years old, and it's failing. There's no question about it.
Randy, you had said on the sale of the properties that couldn't drop to free cash. It has to be used for another capital.
It has to go into a sale of assets account, and then it has to go towards an asset of similar depreciable life.
Yeah, I did not know that. Very interesting.
So it would have to go to if you sell a building, it has to go to a building.
Yes.
It can't go to infrastructure?
Correct.
Roadways and infrastructure.
Well, if that has a similar depreciable life, yes. Like roads. Yeah, you could do that.
So you could take that money and put it into the improving the roads and the infrastructure.
Yes, you could do roads because roads have similar depreciable life, longer depreciable lives
Okay.
typically than town building.
Okay. in fairness, I know you got to
Yeah.
run off.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So,
Wait for the presentation.
thanks. I am available for other questions
All right, thanks, Randy.
later. Thank you. I'm going
Thanks.
to turn it over to
And Joe and Mike?
so they can show you their handiwork.
My name is Joe Milani. Is this okay? From Castle Booz Associates. Michael McEwen from Castle Booz is also here. Starting last fall, as Randy said, we engaged on a feasibility study for the town hall to review the reuse of the building. This feasibility study took 3 steps. The first one was to review the existing conditions of the building. The second was to review the space needs of the occupants of the building. And the third was to develop conceptual designs for whatever the results of the first 2 phases were. In developing the existing conditions summary, KBA and our consultants all came through the building, analyzed the building. We looked at the current conditions of the building with regard to the fitness of the infrastructure, the condition of the existing equipment, architectural issues such as windows, walls, roofs, etc., structural issues, as Randy said, seismic stability, condition of the exterior walls, the basement. We've accumulated all that into a report. That's a draft copy is on the desk if you want to glance through that. Second part of the review was to develop a space needs summary. We looked at the individual needs of the occupants of each department. Interviewed the individual departments. We went through a series of review sessions with the committees as well as the users to try and make the space summary more efficient, consolidate space, find efficiencies where we could combine uses. Some of that is represented in the plans you'll see behind me. And then the third phase was to develop this conceptual design you'll see behind me. With that, in an effort to save time, I'll just jump into the design if you don't mind. The first scheme, called Option A, is renovation of the existing building with an addition on the back. As Randy mentioned, the way the program developed, there is additional space needed for the future development and growth of the future in the building. Right now, they're very cramped, they don't operate efficiently, and the additional space is necessary to accommodate really a very conservative future growth. A lot of concessions were made by the users from our original program to get it to what you see today. Here you see the representation of the building we're in now, and in the lighter blue is the addition that will be on the back and the parking lot side of the building. On the main level, which is the level we're on, we tried to consolidate the users into suites of like use to try and save space where future growth could be more flexible. You could have an empty workstation or space for an extra workstation that could be used by multiple different users depending on who needed it at the time, rather than having segregated offices in different smaller walled spaces where you'd have to have a dedicated expansion space for that particular user. In the light green here, you see the space for the finance department. This consolidates the accounting, assessor's office, and the revenue office into one. Currently, the assessor's office is separate from the two, but we found that we could share some of the resources, the work areas, the storage spaces, and the open office spaces for it. In the blue next to it is the clerk and VA office, also sharing some open office space, workspace, storage space, and in the, I guess you call this kind of purple, is the admin office areas. Location of these things is also determined by the need of the users. This is located off of our main transaction lobby where we've arranged a series of shutter windows so that public coming in would have basically one-stop shopping to drop off and transact business with whoever they're dealing with, whether it be the revenue or whether it be the admin offices. The admin office is also located next to a new Selectmen's meeting room, which will replace the room that we're in. This adjacency is necessary because we have a separate meeting room that is used as either a meeting room for the admin offices or, in an effort to consolidate space, is also used as a breakout space or an executive session room for the Selectmen. On the lower level, we have the town planner, the conscom office, and the health agent's office on this side of the building, and on this side is the building inspection office. This is a little more problematic on the lower level. There elements that we cannot get rid of. Some of the safes, the way the building is constructed, you cannot get rid of. They have to stay in place. Areas where the stairs are and other elements have to stay in place just because of the way the plank, the floor concrete plank is laid out in the building. You can't get rid of it without a very, very expensive rework of the floor system. So we've consolidated whatever we could for the building inspection office here, as well as the town planners over here. There was a need for archive storage and vault storage for protected, fire protected storage for public documents. Rather than having secure storage within each office, safes, storage closets, the like, it was determined that there is a high amount of redundancy in the amount of stored material that goes on in the town hall. In an effort to remove that square footage from the user's square footage up in the office space, we put that down into the vault space to cut down on that square footage. Option B. Option B is a renovation, is actually a new building, ripping down the existing building and creating a new building in its place. Both options, because of the abatement work and the hazmat removal work that would take place, would require the occupants to leave the building, find temporary offices, and come back. There really is no benefit to one or the other in terms of moving people out of the building, having to come back. They're both the same. And this building is in almost the same location as the existing building. We have a longer facade on South Street, trying to maintain the civic appearance of the building on South Street, which has been so strongly felt by the users and the town people that we met with, that they wanted to maintain that image. We do still, again, have a space in the back for the Selectmen's meeting room. This accommodates much more parking in the way the building is laid. It's shifted slightly forward, creating an entry plaza, but we gain about 13 parking spaces in the front of the building. We've added spaces on the side of the building for use by the inspections office and the office on the bottom floor. The way this building lays out is a little more efficient, and you can tell by the square footages that are in the packet, and the next board I'll show you. Again, we've consolidated the users into like suites. Again, the admin office is located directly adjacent to the selectmen's meeting room with a common meeting area between them. This was kind of important in both schemes to have this at this end of the building, and we went back and forth quite a bit with the users about the correct location of this space. We wanted to be available both for functions like this, but also for functions that would occur outside of the use directly of the town offices, so that this could be closed off and used as a separate function hall during nights, weekends, or whatever for different functions. By closing off this door and the door in the other scheme, this now becomes an independent entity serviced by its own bathrooms and its own entrance, and doesn't need to be open to the rest of the town hall when people are using it. Next to the admin office, we have again the town clerk's office and the VA office with an entrance off the South Street side with a stair. And then the finance office, again, same users in the finance office. We have the same kind of transaction lobby in the front corridor. This is entered directly off the parking lot, kind of a requirement of the way the building had to lay out for the users. They wanted to have it as close to the parking area as possible so that people could come into their business and go. We have the transaction counters for the finance office, the admin space, and the clerk's office all within this corridor. On the lower level, again, we have the inspections office. However, combined in that office is the health department, the conscom, and the town planner. This wound up being a little more efficient, actually cuts about 500 square feet out of the combined use since they're not separated. These get a separate entrance on this level with transaction windows for each off of a main transaction corridor. Again, off of the back of the building, we have archive space and fireproof storage. As a comparison between the two designs, the chart. I'll make this as graphic as we could to minimize the amount of reading. The blocks represent relative space sizes for the different uses. We broke up common space, program space, and storage space. Common space is basically corridors, toilets, stuff like that. Program space is the user space for each suite combined together, whether it would be the finance department, clerk's department, whatever. And the storage space is mechanical spaces, general storage spaces throughout the building, generators, closets, stuff like that. So in the design program, we had about 5,510 square feet for common space. 9690 square feet for program space, and a little over 2,600 square feet for storage space, for a grand total of 17,845 square feet. And I want to emphasize that when you're designing off of an estimated program, there are a lot of things that can develop during the design process that allows you to develop efficiencies in the program. But a lot of times this is your best guess at what the needs are based on your interviews with the clients that you're dealing with. Option A, which is the renovation and addition. Common space is slightly larger because of the inefficiencies in the building. When we design a new building, we can take the program that we have, we can lay it out to the best possible way to take advantage of the sizes of the rooms that we're designing around. In the existing building, you fit the spaces that you're given into the space that's available, and sometimes the space that you have available is a little bigger than you need, and sometimes a little smaller than you need. So it isn't quite as efficient, both in the layout of the building users or for the circulation. So in this case, both this common space area and the program space, you can see, are much larger than the design area in the program. For option B, the common space is almost identical. It's a middle amount off, 248 square feet off, just because of the efficiencies in the layout of the building. The program space is a little bit smaller, and those efficiencies developed, as I said, by combining elements within the suites and the user groups. Workspaces and storage spaces became combined together. Circulation space and, say, workspace or cube space for open office space became combined together, and it led to an accumulation of a savings in the square footage, and we tried to be as good as we could in trying to save square footage. And then in the storage spaces, it's about a little bit less actually than the design space. This is primarily due to recent testing by the town that allowed us to delete the use of a fire pump in the building. Since the street pressure is adequate, we don't have a fire pump to boost the pressure because we, as Randy said, we have to add sprinklers to this building or to any new building that we build by code. Some of the pros and cons for the two. Obviously, as I said before, one of the pros for the addition and renovation option is that we do retain the South Street facade. That part of the building would be maintained. We would modify the front stair so it's a double switch front stair. It does address the program's needs. You can fit what you need in the building with an addition, and it does improve the function of use. However, some of the cons for this building are that it does have an inefficient layout. There's a high cost of retrofit. One of the higher costs of the retrofit is that the exterior of the building, believe it or not, is comprised of 4-inch brick with 4-inch block. There's not even an inch block on the wall. It's a very brittle, thin structure. The walls are only 8 inches thick. On top of that is a steel truss that spans from that wall all the way to the wall on the other side of the building. Without any reinforcement in the walls are not seismically stable, and so to make the building seismically stable, we would have to bring in columns under each one of the trusses and a beam running around the entire building going down to footings that are recast into the basement. It's a very expensive renovation, but you have to stabilize the building seismically for the amount of renovation you're doing now by code. And in any event, you would hope that a municipal building as important as a town hall in a town would be available in the event of a tragic, fire, earthquake, hurricane, whatever. You wouldn't have the town hall failing. You want that as one stable force in the town when those things happen. The high cost of retrofit, as I just mentioned, for the seismic, is an inefficient building envelope. We can try our best to re-insulate the outside of the building. However, there's always going to be leaks. There's always going to be places you can't get a vapor barrier. There's always going to be places you can't get insulation. It does lead to slightly more costly operations of the building over a long period of time. Both buildings would require a variance only because the way the current zoning is, there's no way to put a building on the lot that's remaining. It's a small 20-foot sliver in the middle of the lot. It just wouldn't work. And you lose some parking in the first one. Some of the pros of the new building are you do get a new energy efficient envelope. It is much more efficient than renovating an existing building. As you can see from the square footage that we're designing, the program layout is much more efficient. It does involve a smaller footprint, so we're able to fit the majority of the building onto the floor plate where the existing building is, minimizing the problems that might be incurred by moving it to a different part of the site and getting involved with ledge or other unsuitables underground that may have to be removed. It doesn't provide more parking. It does have lower operating costs. The same cons would be that it both require variance and temporary offices for moving the residents out during the renovation period. Also, Michael McCune from our office is here to talk about cost issues. Yes, thank you very much.
What we did, and in terms of cost, and you have to understand, of course, this is actually conceptual plans, although, as you can see, they've been developed to a pretty high level for concepts. But we don't have design of electrical and HVAC systems. However, we did take descriptions of the systems that we were planning for the renovation, give them to a cost estimator that we've been working with for many years, and is very good at taking very preliminary information. We sit down, we go through the scope, go through the plans we've developed, and they've been pretty good at coming up with some pretty reliable numbers. Having said that, we do have the estimates. We've also added at this level a design and pricing contingency of about 10%. General conditions and requirements are that's also in the 10% range and has to do with the cost for the general contractor of actually setting up and doing work here, and their supervisory personnel. Insurance, bonds, the contractor fee, we're assuming they would attempt to make 3% on this job. However, that's really not what current conditions are. Current conditions are lower than that. Often contractors are bidding to cover their general costs. They're working for cash flow, but that's a market-driven percentage. And escalation, we have a 3.5% escalation here to go to the point of bidding. We've also estimated as closely as possible the architectural cost, and we took an even-handed approach. By that I mean even things like the owner's project contingency, we added 10%, when in reality, in a new building, we would probably be comfortable with a lower percentage, but we wanted to be as even-handed as possible in reviewing the two. So we left all those percentages the same. The only thing that changes, we do believe that the construction of a new building would take a couple of months less than the renovation. So those come out to a total, as was previously talked about, of $7.8 million for option A, which is the ad reno. This one here, and that plan there, and $7.9 million for the new building option. Again, we have some detailed information there. If you have any questions regarding that, there's also some other backup information that came directly from the estimate. That concludes our presentation, except for questions.
Okay, questions, Paul?
Sure. So on the list of major building issues, there's a lot of stuff here. Do you mind just speaking to those? Like, how do these line up with what you've seen in other town halls? And essentially, I want to get to the nugget of, is this a really bad town hall, and how does it compare to others?
It is not a typical construction. It's sort of a hybrid type of construction for its time. There was some experimentation, and this is a personal opinion. Experimentation done on trying to save costs, make it as inexpensive as possible. As I said, or as Joe said earlier, the outside walls are actually brick, 4 inches of brick, right up against 4 inches of block. Modern buildings, even buildings built in the 60s and 70s, have a cavity in between where you're able to allow water to get through to a certain point and then weep it out. And they're held together, they're wider, they have structural elements in them that help carry the roof. So this essentially is a very fragile shell. Think of an egg, very fragile. And to date, you've been very lucky and have had no problems with it. And that could happen, that could go on forever. But it does not come anywhere meeting the seismic code. It will not withstand horizontal forces at all. And simply sitting on top of it like a hat is a steel truss structure with wooden planks. And by the way, a lot of lead dust there. So because this was a police station, there's a lot of lead in the building. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of money spent on abatement. A lot of money would be spent on making the structure rigid. And as Joe said, that weeping wall problem, we have worked into this estimate a cost of excavating around the high side of the building and waterproofing that wall so that we wouldn't have the weeping wall in the future.
Got it. Someone might, well, I will ask, is there an option C where we could, a la carte, hit the top 80% of the problems and, could that be done efficiently, or is that really not an option, hitting the top ones in a cost-effective manner, or is it imprudent, or?
Well, I think the things that we're taking care of in terms of reparations, all of the fixing of the building, they all have to be done. We have to make it accessible. We have to make it seismically reactive. It has to be able to take a seismic load. You can't do any renovation of this size on any building, let alone a public building, without doing that. And the problem is, of course, some of the layouts, as Joe said earlier, the structures down below, they can't be taken out. That's another thing about the construction. The floor is actually a concrete plank floor. You wouldn't have expected that, but they're probably in 1963. They must have gotten a pretty good deal on concrete plank floors, which are an excellent floor. The problem is, cutting holes in it is a structural nightmare. So any place we have to now open up ducts to get ductwork for a new HVAC system up and down through the building, we have to put structural members to hold up those the concrete planks. So the problem really is it's a very expensive renovation of this building, and it's not a common type of structure for this or any other era that I'm aware of. And I think there was some creative thinking in terms of trying to do this as inexpensively as possible with, of course, no knowledge of future codes and future renovations that might have to take place.
Let me try just one more, slightly differently, is if I'm someone who's against this project, which I'm not, but let's say I were, right? And I'd say, okay, I tell you what, fine for me on the major building issues, the ones that are safety issues, I'm willing to pay for that, and let's do it where it's less than option A or option B. Is there a option C where, it would be much cheaper to do it that way? Or is that just you can't address the major issues without doing either A or B?
Well, actually, the basis of the discussion should be that you need to add to the building in order to make it usable in the future. That's the first question. Under the new code, the IEB, International Existing Building Code, which renovated buildings are governed under now, multiple things have to be done once you pass certain thresholds. The building would have to be fully sprinkled. All accessibility issues would have to be resolved. The building would have to be fully abated. The structural seismic stability issues have to be resolved. Beyond that, you're looking at the equipment in the building being at the end of its useful life. I mean, the roofing doesn't have to be replaced by code, but it makes no sense to renovate this building and not replace the roof,
right? Because
it's just going to leak over the new construction. When you renovate the building, it makes no sense when you expand the mechanical systems not to replace some of the equipment. And some of the equipment that's fairly new was considered to be legacy to be reused in the renovation estimate. But by and large, the majority of the ductwork, because of the relayout of the building, would have to be redone anyway. Electrical systems are out of date and not to current code. And you can look at it two ways. If it's required by code to be replaced under the existing building code, that if you're going for a building permit today, what would the building inspector require you to do? The second thing is to look at it and say, well, just because it's an existing building and the building code may not require you to do something, the current building code, that is not the intentional existing building code, but the current building code may require you to do things or may recommend you do things. Over time, the reason that codes are different from 1968 to now is because tragedies happen, unfortunately. And as these tragedies happen, the building codes are updated to prevent further life safety tragedies. Involved with that is our recommendation and expectation that when you do a renovation of this scale, that you would be updating the building, even for the things that aren't required to get a building permit, to be updated to comply with the intent of the life safety elements of current code. In that report, in that estimate, there isn't any fluff. This is what we're looking at, is replacement of systems that give you another 40 years in this building or in a new building, or replacement of stuff that would be required for life safety conditions so that people in the building feel safe and comfortable.
Thank you.
If I could just add, so there really is, we didn't look at an option C because frankly, when you take care of all the updates that you have to do here, actually relaying out the building to make it more efficient is sort of very inexpensive. You might as well do it. It doesn't make sense for option C, take care of the life safety, and spend 3/4 or more of the total amount and not have a functional building.
Great, thank you.
Jim?
I thought it was a great presentation. Castle Booze, I mean, this is your forte. You do a lot of public buildings, and the permanent building committee is working with them. So I don't think they've steered the town wrong yet. I have concerns to warm up to this, and it's nothing to do with the architecture or the programming. It's more of the process. We're borrowing a lot of money. We're taking money from the high school and bringing it over here. There's a lot of things that have to come together for this to get to the $8 million. That, quite frankly, I'm surprised that we can vote on this in May. And I think I need a little time to figure that out before I'm warming up to it. But as far as option A and B, there's a lot of information, but I understand what you're saying, that to renovate something, by the time that you're done with it, it seems like a tear down would be nice, but a lot of people would like new houses, and I'm just wondering if this is the time to do it. So I got to think about that. And again, there's nothing to take away from your presentation and the work that the building committee has done, because it was presented very well.
I mean, we debated this. This was presented to the building committee last Wednesday. We debated for hours the renovation versus a new building. And I went in, without hearing the presentation, in my mindset, why would I tear down a perfectly good building and not rehab it? Well, this is not a perfectly good building. So by the time we debated the additional 4,000 square feet that we're going to heat, we're going to air condition, the $100,000 difference between new and old, the inefficiencies in this existing building when we rehab it, the building committee, like I said, we debated for hours and unanimously voted for option B for a new building.
Great. Thank you.
Lorraine?
I just wanted to thank Castle Booze for the work. Having sat in on some of the meetings with where the program of the design was discussed was very educational to me, and I think the programs as they've come out are really well thought out. I think the staff are really excited to think that this could come forward. And, I also want to thank the Town Asset Review Committee members. We were established in 2009, and we were to look at town assets to monetize them for just this type of purpose. And the members of the committee are here tonight: Kevin Weinfeld, Bill Caspara, Gary Whitehouse. Bill Yukna's not here. Randy and myself, along with occasional participation from Kevin and Andy at the time, and also Lisa Sinkus. And I think as we worked together on the Town Asset Review Committee, there was a lot of study that went into all the parcels that are out there owned by the town. We really are coming to the end of phase one, which was to identify what is essentially the low-hanging fruit that comprise this $2.2 million that can come into play here. So our next phase will be to work with the different committees that we would look to gain consensus with. These are town-owned properties, but fully recognizing that we would want consensus with other boards as necessary. And but again, I think the other beauty of this is that we don't need to monetize these right now with the short-term financing that Randy described. We'd be able to start this project, much as the Ahern project was started, at a time when our opportunity to get lower bids is here right now in the present. I'm hopeful that we can get a consensus of the board to support this project and begin to move forward Mike, did you want to add anything else, the discussion from the Permanent Municipal Building Committee? And
Again, we just debated, I mean, the financing, that's one thing the town has to decide and so on. I mean, Randy gave a great presentation. If we don't need a debt exclusion, that's great. It won't go on permanently under the tax rolls, or at least on for 20 years. Our concern was to debate whether we rehab or build new. And if there was $500,000 difference between the two, a rehab would be the way to go. But we're talking $100,000, and with the contingencies we're carrying, it could conceivably come in less to build a new building than to rehab and add on here. So, like I said, we debated the energy issues and the efficiencies of the building, et cetera, and solving the water issues coming in, tearing down, raising the grade slightly. We can eliminate all the moisture and the humidity and the dampness in the basement and so on, and make it usable space. So, again, we unanimously voted that a new building is the way to go.
thank you. And ultimately, we're doing this without a debt exclusion. We're proposing to do this without debt exclusion. We're proposing that there'd be no increase in taxes to the residents. I can't think of a more beautiful way to accomplish what needs to be accomplished for the town. So.
That's great. Mike, one question for you. So you discussed between A and B. I assume that means that the committee believed it was a foregone conclusion that something should be done. Is that?
Oh, something has to be done.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear.
That's.
Got it.
I mean, it's 48 years old, and I mean, if you go downstairs, it's pretty poor down
Okay.
there.
I think
So-
that was the conclusion, I think it was the conclusion of the previous study that was done in 1999.
Right.
That's how I should have asked my prior questions. Thank you.
Does anybody else have anything to say? Questions? Dave? Dave, can you just come over to the, anytime that you speak tonight, could you please come over to the microphone? Thanks. Just your name and address for the record, Dave.
Dave Fislow, 2 Highland Circle, Foxborough. Where you need temporary offices, has that been figured into this cost, or is that going to be
Yes.
above and beyond?
Yes.
Okay, because it wasn't mentioned anywhere.
We have carried an amount for that.
It's in our estimate, that's a $7.8 and $7.9 million
So
estimate.
that includes that.
$300,000 for moving.
Which building code was this designed on?
It's designed under the existing building code and the 8th edition of the Mass State Building Code. Which is the
Eighth
IBC.
edition. Okay. That's it.
Anyone else? Well, Randy had mentioned, Kevin, that he wanted us to not necessarily take a vote, but that we were, in support of this for going forward for the warrant. I mean, this is all like, hi, here it is. It's a lot to swallow right away. I don't know if this board is ready to move to support or not, or if we just want to do a straw vote. We don't have Larry here this evening either, but
I don't think we want to put the board in a position of having to see a major presentation like this and then react to it right away. That's not fair.
yeah.
I think, kind of what we're looking for is if the board sees something drastically wrong, let us know. We've got to continue to develop the finance plan. We've got to begin getting this out to the townspeople. It's a big proposal, and we don't want to have the first night people hear about it be town meeting. So unless there's sort of 2 things you can do short of an outright vote of support. You can basically say, look, we don't see anything terribly wrong with this. You can pass a motion that says generally we think you're headed in the right direction. Or you can basically, if I say to you, we're going to continue to show townspeople this plan, just don't say anything except don't say no, and then we know we can go show it. We just need a comfort level. We've only got 3 or 4 weeks till town meeting, and we don't have a lot of time to get this out on the road. But we don't want to do it without, some level of support from the board. So, kind of a touchy-feely question, what you're comfortable with at this point.
Right.
But I'm always loath to ask the board for votes on things that you're just seeing for the first time, on an evening. It's not fair.
Yeah.
Presumably, and of course, I can't remember since it was 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago when we discussed it, but is it just Article 15 that we're talking about?
Yes. Yep.
For town hall.
I can't remember
Let me-
didn't we do a little straw poll amongst ourselves if we're supporting the different articles?
To go to town meeting?
To go to town meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Article 15.
I presume my sieve memory is correct, that I would have supported it back a
Right.
couple of weeks ago, and I still do. I'm glad it's
Yeah.
moving forward. I don't think we're ready for any final decisions. I don't think
Right.
municipal building committee's ready for any final decisions, but certainly I wouldn't want to
Right.
put the brakes on it at this point. The town meeting will speak.
Right, exactly. That's the most important.
I think it'll be important to get the information out, and, if we can have consensus that Kevin can work to make that happen, around the town, then, come the time of town meeting, then we will all know where we stand, and the voters will decide.
Can I ask a question? Just if this gets approved at town meeting, that doesn't mean that it's done, that we're doing it, right? Let me just,
Say that again?
let me see, Article 15, see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate this money. Let me just read it on the fly. Does this mean we're doing it if Article 15?
Yes.
Yes.
That's okay.
If it
So, all
passes,
right,
we're
okay,
doing
if
it.
it passes,
Up
we're
to
doing
the
it.
8 million, yeah.
Yep.
See, I think that's my concern, that if we don't know and we're raising it now, how the heck is the public going to understand this when they're raising the hand? And, you get 100, 150 people show up versus a general town of, 1,800 people showing up. It feels like I'm hearing we need to do it because it's the best time to bid. It's not going to be much different a year from now. We don't have all the money from the school. We got 1.7 if they're under budget. I just have a lot of questions that, it seems like a few weeks ago we're hearing if we don't pass a tax, we're going to lay off 10 people and we're barely going to make the budget. And all of a sudden now we have all the money. It's a little overwhelming to go from
think-
one extreme to the other overnight.
I don't want anybody to represent to you the reason to do this is because it's a good time to be bidding construction projects. That's an adjunct reason, because it is a good time to be bidding them, because contractors are hungry, so we're getting very good pricing on everything we're putting out right now. Solar panels, building additions, repairs, anything, we're getting great pricing. But that's not a reason to do it. The reason to do it is because we've got a problem building. And every year we delay, it gets worse. It is not going to get cheaper. The potential for something bad to happen to the building is real. It is structurally not a sound building. You've heard that. It's full of lead, literally lead in the upstairs with a parabolic deflector for the range used to shoot rounds into the ceiling. The basement is full of mold. I think we called it something more euphemistic on there, but I won't. It's full of mold. You only have to walk down there and smell it. And it's full of asbestos. So I cannot recommend to you that you delay this under any circumstances. You've got an imminent, in my opinion, an imminent public health risk. Right now, the asbestos is encapsulated, so it's not friable. The lead is, we're told we're not exposed to it. We did have a period of time, you recall, a year and a half ago, when employees in this building had to be blood tested for exposure. The mold in the basement, I'm not going to make any bones about it. It's down there. It's not a healthy atmosphere. And we've got people down there because we don't have a choice. We make it as good as we can, but I'm not going to suggest that it's the kind of atmosphere that we should have town employees in. So this project needs to be done. I don't, Jim, I understand your concerns. I certainly share them. But this is to me, this has now become an issue where we either make the appropriation to fix it, and I can tell the employees it's coming, bear with it a little longer, or we move people out of here. I don't think in good conscience we can continue inhabiting this building come in here on a rainy day. There's trash cans all over the place. This is just not viable anymore. The reason the money is there is not because it suddenly appeared. This has been being planned for 2 years now. And it is absolutely the case that if the money that's been carved out for this is not used for this, it's available for something else. But I can't honestly tell the board that we have any higher priority than this. We've got to either fix this building or undertake major expense to repair it. As the building committee said, it's just not cost effective to repair this building. It is not a structurally sound building.
So let me ask you, if, and say I agree with all that, and I'm not disagreeing with it. It's space-wise and HVAC-wise and all the above. Why would it not be put on the ballot for the town to vote on? If it's that dire and everyone knew about it, why are we missing that opportunity and going right to town meeting?
Projects that require an override, debt exclusion override, go on ballots. Projects that don't never go on ballots.
Even though we're taking out a $5 million loan and moving money around?
Yeah, capital projects, these require 2/3 town meeting approval, so you're talking a supermajority at town meeting. And that's the safeguard in Chapter 44, the municipal finance law. The requirement for a supermajority means the public has to be convinced this needs to be done. 2/3 is a very tough vote to get on something where you're going to spend millions of dollars. So that's the safeguard the legislature put in order to be sure that the voters express their feelings strongly. But I've never seen or heard of a capital project which is not requiring an override to go on a ballot. You just, I don't. Mm-hmm. You could. Well, let me correct that. A ballot question would not be a lawful question. There's no lawful way. The statute is clear. It has to go to a town meeting. So a ballot question would not constitute approval. You can put a non-binding ballot question on anytime you want. That's the board's prerogative. But that would not approve anything. So.
But it gives a reading of the population.
Exactly. It's a temperature taker, but it's not a legal vote. A lawful vote for a project requiring bonding authority is a town meeting vote. That's the only way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well,
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for George, you want to come up to the microphone?
George Leonard, 3 Aldrich Road. Where this is on the town warrant, I question the way that it's phrased with everything that's being said. If we go forward with the town warrant, is there a way that we can remove the word raise and appropriate?
The wording raise and appropriate, generally speaking, every warrant article has phrases. And those phrases are to raise by taxation or raise and appropriate by transfer from available sums, and authorize bonding under Chapter 44. Those are generally the boilerplate language that's put on every single article. Now, if we know for an absolute fact an article is not going to require bonding, we don't put into raise by bonds. We'll just put the other two phrases on. This is an article, as Randy showed you, that has a mixture of funding sources. So this, when it gets voted, will actually be both a transfer as well as a raise and appropriate, as well as a bonding. So this is going to have all of them in there. So all the language that's in there is actually needed in this case.
So, Linda, just to be responsive to,
Sure.
I guess, what Randy asked, I personally, at town meeting, I'm going to vote yes on this, so just for what it's worth.
Yeah.
I'll be voting to support it also. As Kevin said, we really can't delay this. It's something that needs to be done.
Well, just understanding that the money that we get from, say, the high school and the sale of any of the properties, they have to go either to a property or something like that depreciates in value.
Bond
So-
proceeds under the statute, surplus bond proceeds, can only be spent on a project which also is authorized under Chapter 44 for bonding purposes and is further limited such that the term of the new purpose has to be consistent with the term of the borrowing for the old purpose. In the statute in Chapter 44, it lists periods of time for which you can borrow. So, for instance, technology, computers, is limited to a 5-year borrowing. Roads are generally limited to a 20-year borrowing. Water pipes, sewer pipes are generally limited to a 30-year borrowing. The consideration is that the useful life of the capital asset should be at least as long as you're going to borrow for. So the taxpayers who are paying for the asset also enjoy the benefit of the asset. That's the theory behind, the tax theory behind the law. So in this case, the high school surplus proceeds from that project, or for building projects which are currently limited to, I believe, 20 or 25-year period. So this fits consistently with that purpose. We couldn't, for instance, take the surplus bond proceeds from the high school and buy trucks with it,
Right.
or computer equipment, because those are for trucks are a 10-year period. So it would only be buildings, and you couldn't do water. But actually, because we operate enterprise funds for water sewer, probably about the only thing you can do those surplus bond proceeds is another building repair or building construction, but some other building, 20 years, 20-year debt.
Okay. Well, then, in that case, I'd be in favor of it. I mean, everything's pretty convincing so.
I'm hoping that the board can start we can get your schedule clear, so your next meeting will be one where you can start taking positions on warrant articles, and I can arrange to have people come in to make final presentations to you on all the warrant articles, and you can just start knocking them out.
Okay.
Depending upon the hearing later tonight and what you're going to do with that.
Okay. That sounds right. Sounds right. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you very much,
Thank you.
gentlemen. I appreciate it. Thanks, committee members. 6:45, we have a discussion with the chief for warrant articles. Chief?
Let me preface, if I could, Madam Chairman.
Sure.
I want to advise the board that we took the article out, hopefully with your permission, that was called the social host bylaw. The reason we took it off the warrant was town council had made a number of changes to it, which were probably a very good idea. Because of the chaotic situation we always encounter at the end of a warrant period, we were not getting word universally shared with all the parties that needed to understand. So, for instance, there was a couple amendments made and the chief didn't know. Then there was a draft that was made, and then it underwent some additional changes. I got very concerned by Friday, or Thursday or Friday, I forget which day last week, that we were about to have another situation where something hit a warrant, got in front of town meeting, and there was an attempt made to substantially amend it on the floor of the town meeting. And since I was treated to why we shouldn't do that at the special town meeting, and having hopefully learned that lesson, I didn't want to run any opportunity for that to happen. Secondarily, the social host bylaw is in my opinion, an absolutely wonderful idea, and I applaud the chief for bringing it to the town's attention. But I've heard a lot of concern that suggests to me that it's going to be a very controversial bylaw. Lots of discussion from AdCom members last week when I was with them on 2 nights. And that, probably more than anything, convinced me that the chief and I need to work with people to build some consensus in town. The SAFE group, the school department, you folks, and bring it back in the fall, hopefully. I don't know that it'll get worded any much differently than it is now, but hopefully with a lot of community push behind it. And that way, when it goes to town meeting, instead of having what could be a lengthy and very contentious debate, we'll have a much briefer debate and a tremendous amount of public support behind the idea. So I removed it. Now,
Okay.
it's not my call to remove it. It's yours. But we're up against a practical deadline in that I had to kind of guess what you'd do.
Yeah.
Because this thing has got to get out of here tomorrow morning and go to the printer, or we will not have them ready for the 9th. And later tonight, I'm going to tell you why I think we need to go on the 9th, not the 23rd. And even if we don't, even if the board stays with the 23rd, we still have to have the warrants ready on the 9th, because we're still required to open the meeting on the 9th by bylaw. And so the warrants have to be in hand ready for that night. So for all those reasons, I took that article out, and hopefully that meets with your approval. There's two other articles that are in here. One is the fingerprinting article, and the other one is increasing the fine on the public drinking bylaw. And again, I think we're very fortunate. We've got an extremely proactive chief in trying to do these innovative things, and I think we should be grateful for that, and I fully support what he's trying to do.
Thank you. Saved one headache for you tonight, huh? I did take a look at, just to talk about the social host provision. I only got this morning an opportunity to look at the rewrite Mr. Durensis had done. So I really don't think that, even for myself to spend some time looking at the rewording, I used a boilerplate myself when I had done the original draft that some other communities have used, not necessarily in this state, but as a general framework. And I think that's what caused Paul to do some more substantial rewrite on it so it would meet local community standards. I think there is more support out there for this bylaw, and I'm sure that the Safe Foxborough Coalition will work diligently if we bring it back in the fall for action then by our community.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks, Chief. Thanks.
Do you want to discuss the
Yeah.
civil fingerprinting?
Yes.
For years, police departments have not had access to match up people's names with their real criminal records. This past year in 2010, the legislature actually created the opportunity that when people come into our town that want to get a hawker's and peddler's license or want to get a solicitor's license to go door to door to sell merchandise, that we can then have them verify who they are through a fingerprint records check. It's going to raise the cost for people that want to have such a permit in the community to $100, and half the money goes to the people at the Firearms Record Bureau that also are responsible for our state fingerprint record system. I think it's essential that we have a better idea on who is going to be in the community going door to door that isn't a resident or a charitable group or a religious group that are exempt, by the way, or a political group when they're doing their work door to door. However, the salespeople and the people that come from Louisiana, Oregon, Idaho, and the different addresses we have to check, and don't necessarily present identification that you could validate. So this way we can do a fingerprint check on the individual, be certain that they don't have any federal or state record across the country before we give them permission to be in our community.
Makes sense.
So that's the thought behind it. And the article that you see is actually a draft format that was done up by legal counsel, the Massachusetts Chiefs of Police, Attorney Jack Collins.
So there shouldn't be any problem with this.
I
Paul's
don't
Paul's okayed this, or
Tweaked it a bit.
a little bit?
Right.
But, okay.
Chief, why the exemptions?
Well, there are some groups and people that are more local in nature, and I would be hard-pressed on a religious issue if somebody wanted to go door to door to pronounce their faith and encourage people to join them. Same thing with political action groups. You're prohibited from restricting their ability to go out and promote political causes. So that's why
Right.
I have to judge that carefully. If it's for a for-profit operation, I see that as entirely different.
In anyone who, including religious groups or political types, they have to apply to the police, or at least let the police know they're going door to door, right?
Yes, they do come in and they let us know when they are in a particular neighborhood, just to, make them alert.
And they don't get an ID or special card to show folks, right? So people, if someone's coming to the door to door, they should call the police if they want
Right.
and say, hey, are these guys okay?
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Is there a distinction, if you go through the list, the peddlers, hawkers, salespeople, pawn dealers, hackney drivers, once they come in for the first time, they're termed the applicant?
Right.
And then the permit is, if they come in the next year and want to reapply, are they the applicant again? Would you have to do this numerous times?
Well, it depends if it's the same person, we could look on a local basis, and they might not have to go through this process, because we've specifically identified, for example, you're James DeVellis. We've done a fingerprint check nationwide, no issues. If you're still in the area, we don't have to go, because at least we know who you are.
Okay. And what's a typical, it looks like there's going to be a pass-through fee if you've got a,
Right,
you're
I
going to
have
be
to-
charged from the state and the federal.
Right. I have to pass 50, if it's $100, which I'm anticipating,
Okay.
$50 goes to the Firearms Record Bureau, and they in turn spend $25 to the federal authorities.
Okay. So is that what you're anticipating, about a $100 cost
Correct.
to the applicant?
Right.
Okay.
And I think that will discourage the magazine salespeople and other people that come through the community, sort of like mosquitoes in the spring.
Okay. Well said. Thank you.
Lorraine?
Ed, about how many of these requests do you get per month?
It's not even on a per-month basis. I spent a lot of time back in February with a particular company, and some of the people of the names they gave me to start doing backgrounds, they didn't match up. Either dates of birth were wrong, driver's license histories were wrong. So I had to go back to them and say, hey, look, where did you find these people? Because things just don't match up. And those that I couldn't find anything on, I asked them not to have in our community.
And will they have some identification if approved by you?
I'll have to figure out a way of issuing some type of identity card to those people that they have passed a background.
I was going to ask the same question, because when someone comes to the door,
Right, how do
is
we
there
know?
a badge or,
Yeah.
if it's up to the discretion of you, some people are going to have it, some people aren't.
Now, some private firms of the major corporations, they have their people ID'd very clearly with the company they represent. But some of the other ones probably don't go to that extreme, and we're going to have to find a way to let people know that this particular individual
Is okay.
has met a
Right.
standard of safety for our community. Not a guarantee,
Right.
but a more intensive look at who the person is.
Have you this has already been vetted through the advisory committee? They were working?
I've been invited tomorrow evening
Okay.
to spend some time with them to talk about the article presentations.
Anything else for the chief?
I was just to editorialize. There's one thing I get really annoyed about at home is if there's a door-to-door salesman and my kids or my wife open the door. I'm like, must we open the door? Do we know this person? How do we know they're not a troublemaker? And same with leaving the garage door open. It's like,
That's
it's
another-
just inviting
Yeah.
problems. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't know you. You know, if you're in the neighborhood kid selling Girl Scout cookies, fine.
Yeah, but
No, I
if
don't
you-
like Girl
if you're
Scout
over
cookies.
12,
But it's like, is there any need? Because, I mean, I imagine that's how, if you're a troublemaker, that's a good ruse. Knock, knock, push your way in. You're never going to have that problem if you don't open the door.
That's true.
Sorry, I'm like, yeah.
Don't go to Paul's house.
Girl Scouts beware.
Girl Scouts, yeah, don't even bother, yeah.
I said I buy Girl Scout cookies.
The last article has to
Yep.
do with our public drinking bylaw. Originally, the fine of $50 was put in place back in 1976, prior to my even arriving on the police department here. And it was done because of, at that time, 18-year-olds were allowed to drink, would drink down at the Booth Playground, would drink on the town common. And as a result, they enacted the original bylaw. I amended the bylaw, I think it was in 1993, so that private property owners would have an opportunity to post on their property that no drinking of alcoholic beverages would be allowed. Thinking that we were going to have problems with World Cup in 1994 with groups such as hooligans. That was the big thought process that people from Europe were coming over and were going to create significant public safety problems. And one way to do that is to make sure that they can't drink on private property at certain times. So that's the reason that was amended. And then I think the fines, seeing that we have raised the fines for the Protective Custody Act, the drinking, the marijuana issue, I think it's appropriate that we keep this public drinking bylaw in effect as well. So it's consistent across the board.
Kevin?
If these articles meet with the board's approval, it would be good to get a couple of votes of support on the record, because it's a long warrant. Well, it's not a long warrant, but there's a lot to it, and you're going to have to come back to these. And so, you know, you got the chief here now, so you can ask him questions, and I won't need to bring him back again. And if your questions are satisfied and you're supportive, we could get these two done tonight and a couple less to do.
And you're talking to the advisory committee tomorrow about
Yes,
these?
Emma,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Do you want a motion, or do you want any questions? Oh, I'm sorry. George, you want to come up? It's okay. It's all right.
Sorry. Where you have mentioned a $100 fee, and we've been talking about fees all over the place, I would recommend that you put that dollar value in this article of warrant. Leave the portion of the fee exactly as it says, because you really don't know. But I don't see why you don't put a $100 fee on a fee you can determine.
Kevin, you got an answer, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
we're trying not to put fees in bylaws like this, because then every time you want to change the fee, you've got to go back to a town meeting for a vote, and it becomes a very cumbersome way to do this. So we very specifically allow the chief to set it. There may be an additional reason. I saw Paul shaking, town council shaking his head. He may have a different comment, I don't know. But that's why, in addition, you've adopted the statute here in Foxborough that allows the department to set the fee. You've already done that. So this is consistent with the bylaw, with the statute the town meeting already adopted. So for those reasons, while I appreciate what George is saying, and 100 may be the appropriate fee right now, it may not be in a couple of years or whatever. I don't know. So.
But Kevin, aren't we doing that on Article 21? We're setting a specific fee.
Yeah, and, you know, one's a fine, one's a fee. Fines, I don't think people can set. It's got to be in the bylaw.
Ready for motion, Linda?
Yes, sure.
So I'd make a motion that the selectmen support Articles 20 and 21 as written.
Second.
Okay, more discussion?
Discussion, I think we should do it separately.
Okay.
Oh, sure.
So it makes a little-
Right, no, you're right. So I
You
retract
just said
that.
20, yeah.
We're being filled. We
I
can't
know,
do that.
I know.
Do you want to retract? I retract my motion. I make a new motion that says we support Article 20 as written.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Aye. 5-0, Pauline.
Was there?
4. Larry is in
Larry
that.
called in.
I didn't count.
I
I'm
make a
counting,
motion.
Chief.
I get a vote
Are you
tonight.
for it?
Yeah, there's a precedence.
Nice. You sing double tonight. Make a motion. We support Article 21 as written.
I'll second that motion.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
4-0, Pauline. Great.
Thank
Thanks,
you very
Chief.
much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Okay, and the warrant. We have more discussion on the warrant.
Well,
right
you've
now.
got two public hearings, one for 7:05 and one for 7:30, and
Yep.
we
Can we,
really need to open those.
okay,
And they're both non-controversial. So.
great. That's great.
Yeah, Mark should be pleased to hear that.
Yeah.
And
Jim,
by the
could
way,
you-
I won't take any of the credit. I'll give all the credit to the chief and to Dan and to Mark. I apologize, I don't know Mark's last name, but his public,
705, yeah.
his Safe Briggs. I will tell you that the amount of work that's gone on in the last 2 months has been enormous. And that's on the second one, the Kenny Chesney permit. This is a Saturday, Sunday venue, and we wanted to
Can we
be
read it? Can we open it first?
Yep.
Yes.
So,
We're going to open the
Lacrosse.
lacrosse first.
the Board of Selectmen, acting as a local licensing authority pursuant to MGL Chapter 140, Section 181, and Section 183A, and Chapter 136, Section 4, Town of Foxborough Revised General Bylaws, Article 5, and Section 6, and also stadium rules and regulations, will conduct a public hearing on Tuesday, April 12th, 2011, beginning at 7:05 p.m. in the Andrew A. Gala Jr. Meeting Room, 40 South Street, to review the application submitted by NPS LLC for the 2011 NCAA Men's Lacrosse Quarterfinals. All events are proposed for Gillette Stadium. All applications for these events are on file at the Office of Selectmen. All parties interested are welcome to attend. Board of Selectmen, James DeVellis, Clerk. And this was published twice, once on March 17th and the second time on March 24th.
Great. Dan, do you want to come up? George, did you want to come up for this, or Chief, anybody? So, Dan, do you want to just run us through?
Sure. This is our application for the NCAA men's lacrosse quarterfinals on May 22nd. We won't know the teams for about a week or so before these matches. It's 1 day, 2 matches, 1 single ticket. We very similar. We hosted the championship games in 2008 and 2009 on Memorial Day weekend. We hosted them again in 2012. For the games this May, gate time would be 10:30 a.m. Game 1 is at noon. Game 2 is about 2:30, and the event wraps up right about 5 o'clock. We expect about 10,000 attendees. We will be seated just on the one side of the 100 level, the east side of the 100 level. Parking is included in the ticket. There's no toll collection at the gates, and there's no alcohol service at the match.
The reports from the departments are all favorable,
Yep.
as you know.
Right.
George's committee as well.
And George, do you have anything to...
I think the only issue, the fire chief said if it's over 10,000 and they spread to the whole, to use the whole open area, that it would go to a level
Change
2.
the level.
But I think
Yeah.
Dan feels confidence just
Yeah.
on the side.
Yeah.
Yes, if we
You're
spill it.
okay if that does
Absolutely.
happen? Yeah.
And we voted to recommend for your approval.
Right. And Chief did, and the health department too, so. Discussion?
I remember when this first came, there was a tournaments going on at Booth Playground, and
Right.
a lot of people didn't even know this was happening. I mean, it was quiet, it was in and out. They don't serve alcohol. I don't even think the NCAA can advertise anything with alcohol on it during the whole event. So it was, in one area, it was very benign, it was quiet, and it was, I think it was very successful the first 2 years.
Yes.
I have no issues, although I do have a question on the New England Lacrosse Classic for the 16th. It
Right.
says that we practiced from Andy Galla last year, that
Right.
you're not applying for it. Is that, vetted through you, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's just trying to be reasonable, and
That's fine.
in terms of the town, we don't lose any revenue from it. It just reduces a little bureaucracy, that's all, because they're all lacrosse events. So
Okay,
that's
perfect.
all we're trying to do.
All right, thanks.
All right.
I'm all set. Thanks.
Anybody from the audience have anything to say? Okay.
Motion to close the public hearing?
Yep.
Second.
Any other discussion on that? All in favor? Aye. 4-0, Pauline.
Ready for motion?
Yes.
Ready to approve the application as presented to us? Is that good enough? Do you want more?
Well, for...
Good enough according to Kevin.
It's good enough. Pauline, you got...
I'm sorry.
Okay, motion to approve the application for the lacrosse.
2011 NCAA lacrosse, yeah. Well, May 22nd.
That's me saying that.
Yep.
Yes.
And there was a second? By
Second.
Lorraine. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
4-0. Thanks.
You can't open the next hearing for 6 minutes, but if it meets with the board,
Well, is there anybody, we didn't have citizens' input, so is there anybody out there that has citizens' input? Okay. Just wanted to double check, Kevin, because it wasn't, oh, you
Yeah,
do?
gentlemen.
Come up to the microphone, Dave.
It's not input, it's just a question
Okay.
later tonight.
Mhm.
The hearing on Waxes, will the public be permitted to give input if they desire?
It's as long as it's before we close the hearing, Dave. That's
Before you
the,
close
yeah.
the hearing.
Yeah.
Now, what if, what bothered me last time was I realized that information that I thought should have been presented, should have been known to the board, had not been presented. And as a matter of fact, I felt you were being told information that was incorrect, in that comments that this is the first hearing that they've had, this is their first violation. I found bothersome, realizing and knowing, as I attempted to do, that they in fact had violations with the state. And to me, it doesn't really matter where the violation happened. It happened in Foxborough, or who called them out on it. So that's my problem. You've told me now. So just remember, I will get up. I may have nothing to say, but I will get up. I don't want to go through that again.
Okay.
Okay?
Thanks, David.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes.
So this is really for Paul.
Yeah,
Is
Paul might know.
presumably we would listen to Dave after, if in fact we find that there's been a violation. He's not going to speak to whether or not there's been a violation, but he could get up and speak about whatever punishment there would be. Is that kind of the way it should go?
Yes, I'm hesitant about the issue of the state violations are state jurisdiction, and the state has its ways of enforcing it. You haven't found those violations. You found the violations that occurred at the last hearing, and according to a recent ABCC decision, even those violations don't count until they've been upheld. So the whole business about when you count violations is one that's being litigated all the time. To bring in these state violations, the state basically suspended the violations unless there was another event that occurred. That's all under their jurisdiction. That's not anything that particularly applies to you.
So that wouldn't have been, like, instead of violation 1, 2, and 3, it wouldn't be violation, 4, 5, 6? It wouldn't. That's not how we would have looked at that?
No, I mean, it's background information, but the fact is that the ABCC has not found. They basically suspended the sentence and gave them a period of time if they didn't have another episode.
Okay.
There's a written decision that the
Right.
gentleman tried to hand in before. Those don't count
Okay.
until there's another episode that the ABC upholds.
And we
you
don't-
have-
oh, okay,
They have
so-
brought these three that you handled to
yeah,
them.
Yeah.
And when the ABCC is considering that, they can consider their prior actions and yours and decide whether the Foxborough ones count against what they have
did.
done,
Okay.
because they are their penalties.
Yeah.
Your penalties are the local penalties. And as I say, there's a recent decision that says that no penalties count, even the ones that you've determined already, until they're upheld.
by the AFCC.
Right, so
Okay.
right now you have 0 full access until the ABCC rules on the prior 3 that you found.
Can I ask a question? Then why bother having here tonight? Why not wait until the 3 that they had here in town are resolved? I mean, they come in here tonight and you're telling them they're gonna have to treat it like it's none, because the other one's pending. I mean, to me, it's just like, I don't get it. It just seems like, why not wait? Why are we doing this so soon? And as far as the 2 at the state level, I mean, you know, they're fact. I mean, if we can wish them, they can wish them away, but they happen. It's documented. Maybe the way the punishment was handled and how that should be handled is different. But the incidents occurred, and they were found to have violated their licenses, and they were penalized. They were penalized through some suspension and whatnot, but that was a penalty. It's on their record. That I don't quite get, but I'll go along with that. But this business of tonight, starting off with a clean record, why not just wait? Why are we doing it tonight?
Well, I think we're going to have that discussion in 10 minutes, Dave, when we open up the hearing, okay?
Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks, Paul.
We got 7:30.
Yeah, it's 7:30, so we're going to open the hearing for Kenny Chesney and Zach Brown. Can you read that?
Yeah, this was already opened in March 8th. Do you want me to reread
It's
it?
Continue.
Continued.
Yeah, but I think we could just go into continuation. So
You need to reopen the hearing.
we need to reopen it.
So motion to reopen the hearing on the Kenny Chesney and Zach Brown Band
Yep.
application for concert at Gillette Stadium.
Thanks.
Second.
And now may I say a thank you?
Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off. I
there's
just
okay. You're
wanted to-
absolutely right. It was the wrong license application. So this is the one where an enormous amount of work.
We have to,
Should
we
we
have
vote
to,
on
we have
it?
to vote on
Opening?
opening it first.
I thought you
So
did.
it's-
We
I'm sorry.
didn't.
Just got a
We
second.
said it, but
Oh.
we didn't.
Lorraine.
Lorraine seconded it. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. 4-0, Pauline. Okay, shoot.
So, this has been continued, I think, twice.
Yep.
And that's unusual. We don't typically do that. But in this case, there was a great deal of concern surrounding our ability to maintain public safety because of the nature of the back-to-back performances. And I will tell you, I participated in one meeting, and the level of cooperation was really outstanding. It was terrific. And I wanted to comment on that because there certainly are times when we have some differences of opinion, and I don't want to miss the opportunity to take note of the fact when an extraordinary effort takes place, because it reflects the kind of partnership between the town and the stadium that we would love to have all the time and do have most of the time. The chief did an extraordinary job of going through all the various scenarios to be sure that we could really do an adequate job. And Dan Murphy and his staff did a terrific job in agreeing to those things, reworking and reworking, until finally tonight the chief tells me that we have a package that will really ensure public safety and do a heck of a job. And I also want to say George's committee did a great job as well. They spent a tremendous amount of time vetting this themselves. And I think the final product that's before the board tonight, we can say with reasonable assurance, there's been a good job done here to protect public safety. A lot of money will be spent, a lot of effort expended in order to do this. But I didn't want to miss the chance to say that because this really has been quite an extraordinary effort. And I know Dan and George and the chief will probably want to talk about it themselves, but I wanted to say thank you and recognize it.
Okay, Dan.
Okay, this is our application for the Kenny Chesney and Zach Brown Band concert. We're applying for 2 nights, for Saturday, August 27th and Sunday, August 28th. We're requesting a sound check for Friday evening, August 26th, ending by 10 p.m. We've eliminated the festival format for the show. I'll cut down from typical 5 acts to 3 acts. That's Kenny Chesney, the Zach Brown Band, and Billy Currington. It's co-headline show, not just in in words. Zach Brown Band is truly they probably two amphitheater dates themselves. So we found that we were talking with the chiefs that we had the issues in the parking lots, and then once the main act went onto the stage, Kenny Chesney went on, the incidents really dropped down. I think the number was about 11 incidents inside the stadium once Kenny Chesney went on stage. So now with Zach Brown Band coming on at 6 or 6:15, we hope to get everybody into the stadium and focused on the event much sooner. Billy Currington opens the show at 5 o'clock. Parking lot opening will be determined by the chief. Fidelity Way will be used for public safety vehicles only unless the decision is to open that for pass holders. The chief's decision to pull traffic off of Route 1. We will have the new tailgating signs that the chief gave us. Stadium gates are at 3:30 p.m. And again, music starts at 5 p.m. and we're requesting a curfew of 11:15 p.m. The scheduled end time is 10:40 p.m. Tickets range from $44.50 to $99.50. Capacity for the show is 55,000. All reserved except for the 1,600 seats right in front of the stage, which he's had and Taylor Swift has had for years. The general admission area right in front of the stage. It's an in-house promoted event, so our employees will seek all the permits, monitor sound levels with Stadium Advisory and Bill Caspar. Working with the chief, and the Stadium Advisory, we come up with a different plan for wristbanding for the fans this year to alleviate any backup at the field entrance. We'll be doing that for the field ticketed holders at all of our gates. Working with Pauline to give a more detailed Porta-John plan. I talked to her as recently as today with placements specifically over in the P10 lot, and we have no fireworks or pyrotechnics anticipated.
All right.
I just wanted to ask, Chief, if you could talk about the statement that says that we will not allow any lots to open prior to 2 p.m., how you envision that working, because it seems like that has, I don't know if that's ever happened.
Well, we've allowed it to happen because we're using the strategy thinking that if we brought them into one lot, tried to control their behaviors, we were going to impact their drinking. And that strategy didn't work.
Right.
So one of the three things that we've spent a lot of time on, and I'll outline all three, and I think I did in my letter to the board, is change the strategy. We have to shake it up somehow. And that's going to be to move people along. I talked in depth with Jeff Stewart in terms of his personnel along Route 1. We're going to be contacting every businesses along Route 1, and we have a buy-in, per se, from the Route 1 Businessmen Association, because they realize that they don't want problems coming early specifically to their lot, and they perceive that there's a fairness. If everyone waits to a certain time, it makes it better for all. Jeff and I have talked in depth about the traffic issue that could cause, but we still think that this is a better methodology for later crowd behaviors prior to the show. And I'm going to intensify patrols throughout Foxborough. I'll be contacting some of the bigger businesses that have large parking lots just to tell them about what we're planning, why we're doing it, and getting their buy-in as well. Because it's not just going to impact the Route 1 businessmen that operate their parking lot operations, but potentially the downtown area, Stop and Shop. Some of our public schools might become holding zones for people new to the area, and then also see what support that Rentham and Walpole and Plainville can do to supplement along Route 1 if they have a problem, to be able to get support to them. Again, the overall thing is to say 2 o'clock and mean it. Not say 2 o'clock and, oh, by the way, there's a special lot, you can come in at 10.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the rationale behind that. And to have the necessary enforcement on duty within the community to make sure that traffic flows, which is important for public safety, but that we don't have congregating groups drinking in the downtown area.
Thanks.
George, do you have anything you want to add?
No, again, detailed by the chief, but I think the biggest concern was back-to-back and the staffing levels, and I understood that you were working on a plan for the Dana-Farber field house. So based on that, and you feeling comfort, and
Right.
the stadium being cooperative, we will have people there throughout it just to observe and we'll report back. But, I think this is a major feat, and I think it's something that, it's exciting to say that it's something that we can put behind us, but, it's not behind us. So.
George, have you been on the Stadium Advisory Committee since 2004?
Yes.
So this looks like from 2004, so this is the 8th time that they've come up. You see it getting better and more coordinated?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Again, it's a continuous improvement. As this year, hearing the chief talk about delaying the start time, but yes.
Thank you.
Well,
Nope.
and does anyone in the public have anything to say? I'd entertain the motion to close.
Motion
the
to
hearing.
close the public hearing?
I'll second the motion.
Any other discussion on that? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
4-0, Pauline?
Ready for motion?
Yes.
Motion to approve the applications for the Going Coastal Tour 2011 for August 27th and August 28th.
Second?
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
4-0, Pauline. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dan, thanks, Chief. Thanks, George. And the next hearing is in 10 minutes.
10 minutes, really?
5 minutes. Is it?
40, right?
7:40 now.
40.
Say enough.
Yep, exactly now.
Upside down?
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Need a digital clock.
We just did that.
We're not
Okay.
being recorded.
So our next hearing is Waxy O'Connor's.
The legal notice is hereby given that the Board of Selectmen will conduct a public hearing on Tuesday, April 12th, 2011, at 7:40 p.m. in the Andrew A. Gala Jr. Meeting Room, 40 South Street, Foxborough, Mass., pursuant to its licensing authority. In accordance with Massachusetts General Laws and annotated Chapter 138, Section 23, 64, and 67, and all amendments thereto. Purpose of the hearing will be to review and discuss information concerning alleged violations of Chapter 138 and a violation of 780 CMR that occurred at Waxy O'Connor's, 121 Main Street, Unit 210, Foxborough, Mass. All interested parties are invited to attend. Board of Selectmen, Town of Foxborough's James DeVellis, clerk, and this was published on April 7th, 2011.
Can I have the parties come up? Okay. Kevin.
Madam Chairman, members of the board, we received a letter dated yesterday. I don't know whether it came in yesterday or today. I got a phone call yesterday, which I didn't get a chance to return until early this afternoon, from the attorney, Patricia Farnsworth, for Waxy's. I'm writing to request a continuance of the public hearing scheduled for April 12, 2011 at 7:40 p.m. Due to a scheduling conflict, my client and I require that this matter be continued to a later date. Thank you for your courtesy in this regard. I did speak with her today, and I did say to her that we have had continuance requests before, that they are often granted by boards, but there was no guarantee of that. Secondly, this was more than late notice, but I told her that I would bring that to the board's attention, make sure that the board saw this letter. I'd like to hear from town council, but I would offer the board this cautionary note. Absent some reason that town council tells us why we should not continue it, my advice to you is to continue it. The reason being, if you have the hearing absent the accused party and their counsel, you can legally do it. And I have actually seen it done on very rare occasions, usually in the instance where 2 or 3 continuances are requested, and the board finally says, no more continuances, they don't show up, and you do the hearing. But when it goes to ABCC on appeal, as it for sure will, if the board finds that there was a violation and if the board imposes sanctions, then the record is somewhat flawed by the fact that the accused and their counsel were not here, that they did request a continuance and that you didn't grant it. Given the gravity of the situation in that this is now a second set of hearings, whatever it is that you determine, I would not want it to be put in jeopardy on the basis of a procedural error or any sort of aspersion cast on your determination, because I'd want it to stand at the ABCC on the facts of what took place, what you found, and your decision would rise or fall on the merits of what you decided, not something procedural. Now, having said that, again, I'd still like to hear from town council and have his recommendation for you, because he may have a different slant on it. And secondly, if after Paul speaks the board still feels that a continuance is appropriate, that it be to a date certain, and that Waxy's be required to pay the costs of the town associated with this evening's attendance by police officers, firefighters, and town council, all of whom we had to pay to be here, because I had no way to know if you would give a continuance, and this is not the kind of thing I can do by a straw poll over the phone, because that would be a clear open meeting law violation. So we have everybody here standing by. Some of the folks are in my office, the police officers. So this is an expensive delay if we have to delay it tonight, and the public should not bear the cost. So having said that, Madam Chairman, I'd recommend you hear from council.
Do you know when the ABCC will be getting back to us about whether they agreed with our prior?
I haven't heard yet, but
You want to come up, Paul? You can come up and sit if you like.
Might as well be comfortable. I'd say a few things here. The first is that some weeks ago you heard and found 3 violations by Waxy's. You have here tonight additional violations by Waxy's. And in addition to the issue of over-serving, we would expect to prove that they are ignoring and flouting their occupancy permit by overcrowding. I would submit to you that there is a public safety issue. The safety of the patrons at Waxy's being overcrowded, and the safety of the community as a whole. As you know from the last hearing, Waxy's was not willing to accept any responsibility. They have appealed to the ABCC, and that's a process that's going to take some time to unfold. And I would expect there, too, there will be requests for extensions and delays. So it could be as long as a year before that comes to conclusion. And even if it comes to a conclusion there, then they have a right to appeal further to Superior Court and onward and onward. In the meantime, we have a community to run, and we have the public safety that we have to take care of. And I would say, given the number of incidences, that this is an unusual case where your attention is needed for correction, to do something to protect the public. And that means doing it sooner
rather than later. My next point I would make is that whatever we do here today, they will be entitled to a hearing de novo, which is a fancy word for saying that it's all done all over again at the ABCC, so that the record that's whatever record is here tonight or some other night, they have an unrestricted opportunity to retry the whole thing. And they can bring in other witnesses or new witnesses or no witnesses. That's where the rubber meets the road, is at the ABCC. That's where the true enforcement power is, and that's where a formal trial will take place. I would suggest to you, the third point here, that they have offered no good cause for a postponement. There's a statement there that somebody has a conflict. They didn't say whether it was the witness or the lawyer from what I heard, but if it was the lawyer, then there are many lawyers in the world. She could have had somebody else come in her place. If a witness was unavailable, then they should have said that they were planning to bring a particular witness, and that witness was not available. They didn't say that. So I don't see that they've made a showing here of any real excuse as to why they're not ready to go forward. And as the town manager has indicated, he's gone through these hearings, and I've gone through these hearings, where you get repeated requests for extensions. And you try to be courteous, and you give an extension, and you give an extension, and you give an extension. And it's one thing if it's a random event, but here you've got such a systematic pattern of events that, as I say, I think this is a little different situation. So for all those reasons, I cannot recommend an extension here.
Okay, so we just move along without them here to, participate then, right? And we
Again,
make
that's
our
up
facts.
to you. There's a request. They've made a request. You have to rule on that request.
We have to rule on their request that came in a day before.
Well, again, that's another point. That's pretty rude to do
Yeah,
it
I'd
the day
say.
before.
Because we gave them 2 weeks' notice to let them know we were doing this. So, again, I'm not very happy with this right now. So we have our workers here this evening. I mean, my recommendation was that we go with the hearing. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Wood?
I'm inclined to follow Paul's advice. I'd be interested whether or not you think there's a compelling reason not to follow Paul's advice.
She didn't tell me anything, the attorney, except that she had a conflict. But she didn't embellish on it, and I gave her an opportunity to embellish if she wanted to, but she didn't. So I can't report anything more to you than that. I would say to the board, I certainly don't disagree with what Paul said. I think we have an imminent public safety threat. I said that the last hearing, and now even more the case. I do, however, hearken to one of the realities that we deal with that Paul mentioned, which is if you take action tonight and you end up making a finding and you impose some sanction, it'll probably get appealed. And unfortunately, it's the way the system works. It's very frustrating, but the hearing on that appeal could be some months from now. In fact, I can pretty well guarantee you it'll be some months from now. So no matter what you do, we're not going to be able to necessarily cure just by your action the problem. What I am hoping, and I did have a conversation with the attorney today, I said, you are on a crash course. Your client is on a crash course to lose their license. No doubt about it. So, you've got a choice. And the choice is to convince the public safety officials of this community, police chief, fire chief, building inspector, that you're going to get this situation corralled. Now, that's got nothing to do with whatever you're going to find on these charges in this hearing. But if they make a sincere effort to try to fix the problem and understand that they are on the precipice, then perhaps public safety, the needs of public safety can be met by them understanding that they are in a perilous position. And I laid that out in absolutely no uncertain terms. We'll see what comes out of that. I don't want to predict. But that means I don't want you to think that the reality is the only thing you can do is have a hearing, impose sanctions, and then a year from now you get upheld, and bad things can happen all the way along the way. Hopefully we can fix it.
They're going to appeal it anyways, Kevin. That's what I'm saying.
If you are of a mind to give a continuance, and even after hearing what Paul says, I would still recommend it only because I want an absolutely flawless record. Because, in my opinion, I've seen these before. I see clearly where this is going. If corrective action isn't taken, it's very clear to me where this bar is going. They're going to lose their license. So, I want your record, whatever happens, to be flawless and to be unencumbered by any procedural defects. It is not a procedural defect to go forward, but it is something the commissioners will take into consideration on appeal. If you do grant a continuance, I would suggest it be worded in such a way to a date certain and that you say there will be no further continuances. So it's a specific date, it's a short time, and they've served notice there'll be no continuance. And so if they don't show up the second time, we don't have the problem of worrying about this again. Frankly, for a couple of weeks' time, I don't see the problem. And they pay all our costs.
Can I just add one thing? The chief advantage of having them here is to try and work out an acceptance of responsibility and a penalty that would avoid an appeal and maybe even allow us to settle the first set of violations and get all that done without any further delay and immediately address the public safety issue. So as you consider the request, there is an advantage to having them here because you can talk to them and try and reason with them. They are not just endangering the public safety, but they are, as Kevin had said, potentially harming themselves by potentially losing their license, or worse, someone getting really badly injured or killed who will sue them, and they will all end up having to pay a lot of money. So at some point, the process, with having them here, you at least can try and reach out to them. That was to support what he just said, but now that just kind of back away from that a little bit. This particular group completely stonewalled the board and was not willing to even begin a meaningful dialogue.
Right.
And if you think that we will have that opportunity when they come in here to have a teachable moment that will help make them behave the way they should in a reasonable community, then by all means, let's do an extension. But if it's going to be a complete waste of time, then all we're doing is losing time. Because even if you don't start things in the pipeline now, they'll never come out at the other end in a timely way.
And I wanted to share with the board, I said almost exactly those words to their attorney today and said, look, last week you had an opportunity that we were trying to craft to acknowledge a mistake, throw yourself on the board's mercies, convince the board that you really wanted to fix the problem. And instead of doing any of those things, you just completely denied any responsibility, said nothing happened. And that was extremely unfortunate because that was a great opportunity to really show contrition and that they wanted to fix. And I said exactly that to their counsel today. it was an opportunity for her to perhaps say something back, which I might have relayed to you, but I did not get anything back.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean that it won't happen, but I wished I could have relayed something more positive, but I can't because it did not come back. She did say that she would take it to her client and she would have a discussion with him about perhaps considering making it clear to you at the next hearing that there is an intent to address the problem. That's all she said.
Chief, did you have something to say?
Well, I told the board that since the new allegations concerning St. Patrick's Day in the investigation, my staff and the fire service did, along with the building commissioner, some of the arrests that you would hear about in testimony, I've been imposing a detail to officers on Friday and Saturday nights to better monitor what goes on within the facility so that we have some heightened visibility to hopefully moderate the behaviors of people that are going to the establishment. And I'm going to continue to do that until we have some resolution on what we have before the board on these cases.
Do you think that the establishment is safely operating now so that we can postpone this thing?
Safer.
Who's paying for those two people?
Right. The facility has to pay for them.
Has to or will?
Has to. Or jeopardize their liquor license on another reason.
Yeah. Okay.
I haven't gone to look to see what the results are in terms of, continuing custodies. But it would be not judicious to have an extended waiting period, to have the hearing and not have anybody there. That wouldn't be a reasonable thing to do. Because of these issues that you're going to learn about firsthand, I thought it was very prudent to have somebody there to monitor how the business is being run.
I agree.
In view of his comments, I'll withdraw my objection to the continuance.
So,
Hearing that from Paul and the chief, could I ask the chair for a 1-minute recess just so I can check your agenda for the 26th?
sure.
Andy's
Can we
gonna
take
go-
3 minutes, Frank?
Because I know this thing's scheduled already, and I don't want
Okay.
to have you pass a motion that we got to then fix later.
Okay.
Can't be here the 26th? Okay. I suspect what we're going to find out in a minute is that we can't do this on the 26th because we're already buried. So I think we're going to have to pick a special meeting night because the week after that is town meeting.
Whatever we pick, they can't come back at us again, right? Okay.
As I say,
Can
my
we-
recommendation is you pick a date and no continuance.
All right, can you do that and take some dates?
Make a
and
motion,
we'll-
we recess for
3 minutes.
3 minutes.
Thanks.
We have.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. So, Kevin, did you come up with some dates that we could?
Madam Chairman, what we did is we looked at the board's scheduled dates. We've got a town meeting coming later in the agenda. We're going to have to talk about, the board had voted last week to postpone to the 23rd, but turns out we can't do that, so we're going to have town meeting on the 9th. So we've got a lot between, trying to have this hearing between now and then is impractical because you've still got the entire warrant to deal with. So it looks like the week after the 9th, I believe the 17th, is the first date that you really would have, first of all 5 board members here. Next week is school vacation week, and lots of folks are gone. So May 17th is the first date that I think the board will have a quorum available, and town meeting will be now dealt with and over with, and you can turn your attention to this. Having said that, I want to reassure the board and the public that we are not in a passive position here where this establishment will be allowed to do whatever it wants. We've put the following into effect, which is an administrative procedure. The police chief, fire chief, building inspector, a couple other folks were in the meeting about a week and a half ago, roughly, when we were preparing this presentation for tonight. And as an adjunct to that, we put some other things in place. First, the chief has the authority under the liquor regulations to order details, and he has ordered that, and Waxy's is cooperating. Friday and Saturday nights is 2 police officers both nights. Those 2 police officers have the instructions that if they believe that there are any serious issues beyond what they can deal with, i.e. Police issues, that they notify the chief. Overcrowding issues, they notify the building inspector and the fire officer in charge of the fire department. And they come down, they secure the entrances, they do a count. If overcrowding is present, the building inspector orders the establishment to immediately take as many people out of the building as is necessary to get back down to occupancy. If that's complied with and good order is established according to the detail officers, then we're fine. If, on the other hand, the establishment does not comply with the order to reduce the crowd size, or good order isn't established, then the third level is the police chief, the fire chief, and I will be called at home. We will all respond here. We will conduct a meeting, a discussion, assess the situation, and if we find that there's a threat to public safety, we'll provide the building inspector with the support he needs to actually order the building evacuated, meaning it's closed for the night. The fire department, under a new statute that just passed literally weeks ago, has some additional authority, and I don't proclaim to know that well enough, so I'd turn that over to the fire chief to tell you about, but it gives us yet another tool for enforcement. So what I'm saying to you is that while we cannot guarantee that there won't be a violation despite our best efforts, we have put into effect some very powerful tools, which are not something that we'd want to try to sustain on a year-round basis, but is something we can do in the interim for the next 3 or 4 weeks, pending when the board has its next hearing. And again, assuming you have that hearing and assuming you find a violation and you take action, we might have to continue those administrative procedures for a longer time until there's an ABCC hearing and your order is finally, hopefully, sustained and the action takes place. So I just wanted the board to be aware of that and the public to be aware of it, because we've put some powerful protections in place. And so far, we're getting cooperation by the establishment. If that continues, then I don't think we have a bad situation in the short term. And I don't know if the fire chief wanted to say something to you about that new law we're enforcing.
Crowd management one you're talking about, right?
Hi.
Yeah. Hi. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts put into play a crowd management process, and basically Deputy Chief Steve Bagley has been monitoring and managing it for us. It deals with places of assembly that sell alcohol and have this type of situation that we're dealing with, where they're supposed to, the owner and some of his employees are supposed to be trained in the program. They do it online. And it basically allows, they're supposed to manage and monitor the situations that go on at their facility. They're supposed to have checkoff sheets that make sure that all their exits are appropriately cleared, and they're supposed to manage their crowding issues. And so where they're basically obligated to take those programs, they're also obligated to monitor and manage it. If they can't, then we jump in.
And so have they?
Do we have any documentation if they've finished their program?
It goes into effect June 1st.
Okay. So they don't have to do them yet?
Well, they have this opportunity. They've all been notified of it through the mail by the state fire marshal. They have until June to actually complete it. It's all online. So we have no documentation yet from the state fire marshal that they have done it. But we do know that every single person that has a license, a liquor license in the town, has received it, and we've been working with a lot of them already. Just to ask. They haven't not contacted you at all?
No, on the Department of Fire Services website, there is a link on there that gives a list of who has taken it already.
Not. And they have not, Steve?
I haven't seen their name there yet.
So, thank you. Lorraine?
Could I just ask, Roger? So right now, for keeping control of the crowd size, how is that being managed
Right now, they are
in terms of counting people?
right. They're still doing the count. What I have provided, I went out and bought some counters. So I made sure that the deputy has one, the captain on duty has one, the building commissioner has one, the police sergeant has one, and I have one. So now, instead of us just going in there and doing a head count, we actually have now a device that we can use and tally up and actually show that we are doing the count. Gives us a little bit more strength, a little bit more bite. But they, at this point in time, it's still them doing it until we get a complaint, or if the police officers that are there feel that it's getting uncrowded, then those that we've assigned those counters will go there and start doing the count.
That's the protocol I mentioned earlier. The detail officers are the first line of defense. If they think overcrowding is beginning to take place, they call the full-time on-duty police and fire OICs, officers in charge. They come over the counters, do a count, call the building inspector, do a count. If it's overcrowding is present, they get an order to remove that many people, and if they comply with that, an order is established, we're fine. If not, we take it to the third step where the chiefs and I all show up, and then we make a decision whether to evacuate or not.
But Waxies themselves they are not using counters right now?
I honestly have not seen how they do their operations. They have a gentleman at the door, and I want to look at the chief right now.
Mr. Hoffman, you've been working with that.
They are using comments. There, okay, thank you.
So I know that the situations that we've been finding, it makes it very difficult to try to get a heads count because it's so crowded in there. And when you start looking at all the way that floor plan is, I think that the counters will at least allow us to try to have some manageable way or tool to use to help us with that.
Okay, thanks, Chief. So, I guess we need to know whether we want to continue the hearing to a specific date being May 17th, or whether we want to hear the testimony from our folks this evening.
What's your pleasure, Linda? What do you think? Because I actually
you don't really want to know, but
well,
I will say that
I'm very interested because I'm not sure which way I'd like to go, but I'm interested. In your thoughts.
Just in hearing everything, I think that we're kind of, I feel, obligated to continue it to the 17th, and that if they don't show up this time for any reason, that we will take it. We will just hear our side from our gentlemen, that their points and go for it. I mean, the ABCC, my concern is that postponing it may look like we don't take it, that we're taking this lightly, and I am not taking this lightly. I'm really disappointed.
I can assure the chair and the whole board and the public, we have communicated to council very clearly that they are in extreme jeopardy and they need to take this very seriously. I don't think that there is a shred of ambiguity on their part of how serious this is.
Well, obviously they had ample opportunity to talk back to you, to tell you what they planned on doing to be active. We've got the chief, both of the chiefs taken huge precautionary measures, and our public safety people are, and they're not even showing up at the meeting. So I'm not going to go any further because I'm just. But
I think that's helpful.
Unfortunately, I feel like we need to do the 17th because I don't, like Kevin said, it could get into ABCC and they're saying, they didn't have a chance to, and then it goes their way, and we don't have our input, really, so.
Can I just ask, schedule-wise, the 3rd or the 10th of May, why we wouldn't want to have a meeting just for this hearing
Our
purpose?
town council is not available on the 3rd because that's, he's got multiple town meetings to be at, and that's the town meeting season, those last week of April, first couple of weeks of May. And we talked about that. We felt it was important for continuity purposes that we not switch attorneys in the middle of this. We really want Paul here because he's got the history. And I forget why the 10th didn't work, to be honest with you. I don't remember. It's the night after our, if we continue town meeting, that's when you continue to, isn't it? If you don't finish the first night? So it would be risky to book that night, just in case. Even though I think you'll get through town meeting in one night, a little risky.
Okay.
And right, it was you that week,
Okay.
yeah.
So do you want a motion to continue? Is that
I just wanted to add something before
Oh,
I make
sure.
the motion. Today's the 12th. I'm very concerned about this because now we're waiting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more weeks. We've got a school vacation in between it where you know there's going to be families out on the road on those weekends. And I'm concerned because I've never got more phone calls out of any issue that's been on since the 1 year I've been here. People are genuinely concerned. People that have worked there, people with firsthand knowledge, business owners have contacted me. The fact that it's the day of and we get this letter, it seems like everyone's scurrying. We've got 6 uniforms back there here tonight. Everyone's scurrying with their counters to go to their door. We're sending police thing. We're doing their job because they're not doing it. So to sit 5 more weeks and hope that we're going to dot all the I's and it's not going to get appealed, we've already done that. We've extended it even to get to the first meeting that we've had, and they still appealed it. And the biggest concern I have is out of credibility. At the first meeting that we had with Waxies, the board asked them, have there been, under oath, and they all raised their hand that they were going to tell the truth, specifically, has there been any other issues since December and January on those 3 issues? You know, granted, I didn't know about the state issue. I did not know about the St. Patrick's Day issue. And not knowing what those items are that is in front of us, I don't know how egregious it is, but to put it off 5 more weeks, after both of the manager and the owner raised their hand and swore that there were no other issues, and there were 3 the week before that they were here, as they're sitting there lying about it or not telling the truth, I would have rather them not answer than say there was no issues. I don't think they're taking it seriously. And for the fact that we're going to put it off 5 more weeks, we already made this meeting an hour earlier so we could fit more things into it. I don't know what we're going to accomplish other than, if we're conservative, we'll wait and maybe we'll touch all the bases. But if not, I think they're going to appeal it anyways, since precedents, they've already done that. So, hoping I'm not shooting myself in the foot when we get this all done. The ABC maybe finds that we didn't give them their due diligence, but 5 weeks I think is too long to wait. If we can do it next week or the week after, I don't see how it's possible. But from what I've heard, to sit and let it go for 5 more weeks, it's almost laughable at this point.
Next week, because it's school vacation week and people have plans, board members, we can't get 3 of you on the same night. So next week is out. The following week, you could do it. Now, the 26th is, on the 26th, you have to get through the entire town meeting warrant because you won't have another meeting before May 9th.
Oh, yeah, no, I understand the day. I'm not disagreeing. I don't think we can do it. I've been, I looked at the dates. I'm not saying is there a week you can do it. The fact is, it's got to wait 5 weweeks, and that's just too long of a gap.
Well, here's an alternative.
Not knowing what the issues are.
Okay, here's an alternative for you. Again, I certainly agree with you. 5 weeks is a long time. You could do it the week of the 26th. You could meet on either Monday night the 25th or Wednesday the 27th in a special meeting. You would not have town council because he has town meeting commitments that night. But I guess you need to weigh that against having a different attorney here who may not have the history that Paul has on this, but can do a competent job in guiding you through the process. it's kind of a matter of balancing those two concerns. But you could certainly go the 25th or the 27th, and that would be 2 weeks instead of 5.
But then we also have how many police officers are here. I don't know if they're, we might be able to get here, but to make sure all the people that are ready to testify tonight to come back at a different week, we've got a whole slew of people. It doesn't make sense to put it off on the big picture tonight, and I could be wrong, but that's my feeling.
Lorraine?
So, Paul, you're not available April 25th or 27th either, on either side of the 26th?
That's correct. I have town meeting for the 10th.
I'm thinking rather than delay it, to have another attorney come. And if we need to start at 6 o'clock on the 26th.
Sure.
So I'd rather not jeopardize our position by putting a different attorney on it, where Paul's very versed. I mean, he's chairman of all the selectmen in the state. He's an attorney. He's been it for. So we're going to take a different attorney up against their attorney who's already been through this with us. I'm not sure if that's our best position to take. Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've had the institutional knowledge on this from day one. And again, not knowing what the violations are, I'm kind of shooting from a black hole here, but I mean, if they're egregious enough to have our police and fire showing up every night on a Saturday and Sunday with their counters, it's got to be serious enough to push a little bit quicker with our best foot forward.
My only concern, obviously, is public safety, and it sounds to me that I've been assured by not only both of the chiefs, but the town manager that, we're doing what we can do. And I don't think that, regardless whether we have the meeting tonight or we have it in 5 weeks, that anything can be done right now. That's the problem. It's not like we can walk out of here right now and the chief can say, okay, that's it, we're going there right now and closing it down. That's my thing. And so I'd rather have, everybody here and listen to the whole thing, even though we're going to get the response that we got last time. But right now, public safety is in the hands of, unfortunately, our officers that have to babysit one establishment in this town for the next 5 weeks on Friday and Saturday night. That's the problem. But it's keeping us safe, as the chief said. Safer. George, come to the microphone. Or Deb, come to the microphone. Yeah, it's over here now, George. I'm sorry.
Having been present at the last Selectmen's meeting when Waxy's was here, and Paul, if I may, you were here, I did not see any interaction between you and the attorney other than your absorption of information. I should think you'd be able to assign one of your attorneys to be here earlier than the 17th of May, preferably in April, and take care of it and feed back to you the information necessary.
I wasn't going to talk tonight. I swear to God.
Okay.
Debbie Stewart, 44 Neponset Heights Ave. I have a concern. I wasn't here at the last meeting, but I did watch it from home, and I was extremely upset. I'm one of the ones that called and spoke to Jim, and I spoke to Larry, and I spoke to Linda, that I felt as though that there was no, they felt as if they didn't own anything. And there was, I almost felt like a disrespect coming across the table to the selectmen, and this is the governing board that holds those licenses. I personally don't think, I wrote down something that you said, Kevin. You said, we're doing our best efforts. Well, what about theirs? What about theirs? They knew they were coming in. They already knew they were having a hearing. And then St. Patrick's Day, they had more violations. not just overcrowding, if what I read in the paper is true, and I believe our fire department and I believe our young officers are doing a wonderful job trying to keep us all safe, but you can't be everywhere. So we're doing it. We're taking care of everything for them. I feel like we're a parent, and all we keep doing is saying, if you do it again, if you do it again, if you do it again, this is what's going to happen. But there's no consequences. So when Mr. Durensis got up and spoke, I was thrilled to hear that, Paul, that you said, no, enough's enough. They're not here. How disrespectful to give you less than 24 hours to contact all of them. I'm sure these guys, I don't know whether they're on duty tonight or not, Ed could probably tell us, but they have family lives. Do you think they care? All they're worried about is the buck that's going into their machines. And I live off of Chestnut Street, so I hear what's going on down the street at night. And I just don't think, I think we're waiting, as I said earlier, we're waiting for a tragedy to happen. And it's going to happen. And you put it off for another 5 weeks. We're jumping all over the stadium constantly for the alcoholism and everything else that's going on, the alcohol violations. They have to be made accountable, and they're not going to be. And whether you put it off, whether you do it tonight, with them not being here, it's just like they're here. Because they're not going to give you anything. So that's my feeling. And I'm really angry about this. I'm very angry about this. And I applaud all of you for standing there and waiting all this time. But boy, oh boy, I'd be paying double time for you guys tonight.
Kevin.
Lest it be suggested that I'm in any way trying to give these irresponsible bar owners a break, I assure you I'm not. But I want everyone in this room to think carefully about the following. If you go forward with the hearing tonight and you decide that there are violations and you impose sanctions, and then it goes to the ABCC 6 months from now, because it will be appealed, I absolutely guarantee it, and the ABCC overturns you because of a procedural error, think how frustrated you'll be. You think you're frustrated now? I've been through that. Had board members' decisions overturned, boards I've worked for, because they didn't dot the I and cross the T on the procedural stuff. You think you're frustrated tonight? I promise you, if you have a hearing and you get overturned on a procedural error, you'll be frustrated into the stratosphere because all those strikes that should be against an irresponsible establishment get wiped out, and you're back with a clean slate. And that's a far more serious consequence than delaying this. And by the way, what are the implications of delaying? Again, think about this logically. If you have the hearing 5 weeks from now, what have you jeopardized? Nothing. Because the reality is, whether you have the hearing tonight and you impose a sanction, or you have it in 5 weeks and impose a sanction, you're not going to close them even if you order it, because they're going to appeal it. And when the appeal is filed, the censure is stayed. You don't close them. Just like you imposed a sanction a couple of weeks ago, it's not going to happen until 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 months from now when the appeal hearing is conducted and the ABCC decides to uphold you, overturn you, or remand the hearing back to you for a brand new hearing, for another hearing. That's exactly what's going to happen. This 5 weeks isn't going to cost you a thing except absolutely ensure that when and if you decide to drop the hammer, it's really going to drop. And I would say to you, please don't give in to the temptation to send the wrong message, which is you're going to take action based on a flawed assumption that could very well come back and bite you. Be patient. Do it right, whether you do it in 2 weeks, you do it in 3 weeks, you do it in 5 weeks. That's up to you. But be patient, do it right, make it stick, whatever you decide. And in the meantime, we're going to do everything that we can possibly humanly do to keep this place exercising a responsible use of the license.
Just
You ready
please
for
be
motion?
sure. I'm
One more question,
I'm not
Kevin.
advocating for them to get any kind of a break. I'm advocating for you to be absolutely sure that when you take action, it is going to be sustained.
What would be the is there a procedural mistake by having it was posted and they can't make it? By going forward tonight, is that in itself a procedural mistake?
It is not.
So what procedural mistake would we be by having it tonight, you're anticipating?
The presumption by ABCC that given a request, a single request to have a continuance, that you didn't grant it, you went forward, and they felt that you acted precipitously, that the licensee should have been here, should have been given the continuance, and that you acted precipitously in having the hearing without them being present. I mean, it's like being accused of something in court, and you're too sick to be there, and they have the trial without you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we don't do that in America generally. Now, in this case, you can do this, but I'm telling you, based on my experience, if you go forward when you've got a request, one request for continuance, they're commonly granted. And if you go forward anyways, then I think you're really putting it in jeopardy versus acting a couple weeks from now or 3 weeks from now, whatever date you pick, and saying there will be no more continuance. Now you've put them on notice. They have every right to expect that you'll give them a continuance. They're not even sitting here because it's commonly done. It's done in the court system. It's done in local government for these kinds of hearings. So, it's common. Now, that's my fear. You go forward, and it just gives them a leg up on you that you don't need to give them. If it were the case that you could actually have the hearing tonight, impose a sanction, and that sanction would be immediately served, then I would say do it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's
But the
fine.
problem is they're going to appeal it, and you're going to be stayed. You're not going to be able to affect that sanction until 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 months from now. That's the reality, folks. I don't like it either. It's not, it doesn't satisfy the public. It's not easy, but that's what the law provides. And you have to be patient and do it right, even though it's sometimes tough to do, in order to make it stick.
And I agree with everything you said. If this was but there's a pattern, and it's clear, and it's not the first time, it's not the second time. I hear what Paul. Are you still on the same page as putting it off, Paul, from your experience as an attorney and as a selectman, and doing this a lot longer than I have,
Whatever you do, they're going to get a new trial.
regardless of what we do?
So if they're not here, or if they are here, they get an entirely new trial, as long as they're going to appeal. If they were here, you have the opportunity to have a teachable moment and to work with them, to try and get them to see what they need to do. If they're not here, you don't have that opportunity. So where I'm at right now is, as long as the public safety is addressed, you're better off trying to work with them and get them to see what they're doing wrong. That's a better result than simply going to war with them.
Ready for motion, Linda?
Yes.
All right, 17th is what we discussed, May 17th?
Linda?
Yeah, George, yeah.
Wait
We're
a second.
writing
I
it,
was
yeah.
going to say the same thing as Paul.
Yeah.
But I say do not, definitely we shouldn't tonight, in my opinion.
Yeah.
However, do not wait 5 weeks. 2.
Yeah.
We talked about 17th being where...
17th looks like the first date that all 5 of you are available and town council. And I'm assuming those of us who are paid employees, we will be here no matter what date you pick.
All right, so I'd make a motion, we continue the public hearing on Waxies until May 17th. Do we need the hour certain, or?
You pick whatever time. There's nothing scheduled that far out. Yes, I think you do need the hour certain.
7:05?
7:05.
7:05.
And include notification.
I'll get them that.
We want to notify Waxies of their responsibility for payment of
if I could suggest, then you add two conditions to the motion. One, that no further continuances will be granted, and two, that Waxy's will pay all of the town's expenses associated with this continuance.
So moved.
And seconded?
Second.
Okay, discussion?
Yeah, just 5 weeks, I just can't support that. It's going to be a negative vote on my side. I think this is more important than some of the things that we have on the agenda, even if we have to meet on a Friday night. I'm not going to support it if it's 5 weeks, because, yes, we're not going to do anything for that 5 weeks, but they are going to appeal it. It's clear we're going to have a trial to do it over again anyways. So to give up that teachable moment to have it earlier, that 5 weeks is just going to keep falling. So no matter what the decision is, it's going to be 5 weeks later that it's implemented. So,
Paul, is it your preference to be here for that teachable moment? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
One of the gentlemen mentioned that he didn't observe much interaction between the two lawyers, but in fact, I spent a lot of time with the lawyer trying to negotiate a deal, a plea bargain, which would have them come in here and accept the penalty in return for some recognition on your part and their part that you're in this together, you're going to work together. So there is a bit of a relationship there, and there's been a lot of discussion, and we did weigh different alternatives.
Okay.
I think it would make sense to keep that continuity going. I'd also, somebody mentioned Friday or Saturday. I'm free Fridays and Saturdays. Sundays even. If you want to do Friday night, that's fine. I'll be here. I have
Friday
town
night?
meetings that I've got to attend.
Can we do it on a Friday night? Can we do it on,
Yes, you can.
like, let's say the 29th?
But are we truly advancing public safety? I don't think we
Because
are.
I think it's important that if we are going to continue this, that all four of us at least be on the same page, and right now we're not. So I would like to have everybody on the same page with this. That's why. I really think it's important.
The
Because like you
29th?
said, we're dotting our...
I'm out of state that weekend.
Okay, so why don't you tell me, Jim, what date was good for you? Because you're the one who I'm trying to appease here, and...
Well, I mean, you're going to get, it sounds like it's going to be a 3-1, which it is what it is. I mean, that's why we have 5 members. And life is surprising. You're not going to get, very seldom do we get unanimous votes anyways. If my one vote goes across the bow and it says, hey, this board is a little more serious, and it wasn't just a given that you're going to be able to just walk in and take another, another shot at it.
I think we're all serious, Jim.
Okay, so...
Yeah, I do have to address that. Jim, I do think we did hear from our public safety officials that they were comfortable with this, and what they say actually makes sense to me. So I don't think... What I get from some of your comments is that we're not as tough guys on public safety as we should be, and I just don't think that's fair.
When I say to go from one date, you get a letter the day before and say, "Oh, we'll just extend
It's
it."
lame.
If it's
We all agree.
unanimous, they're not going to put their head up. That's just the way it is. Again, if this was just a one-time thing, but I think they're playing us a little bit, and it's a little insulting that
I
it just
think
keeps
they are
going
too.
and going.
I think they are too.
So if they had not appealed the last one, and we don't have to do the whole, we're going to take time off from work and everything, probably the ABC is during the day.
No, we don't go to the ABC. See, I don't
Well-
believe so. We do?
Yeah.
Really?
You might. It depends
can.
on what testimony they want to hear.
But I mean, we weren't there.
Well, town council will be there, the police officers
Yeah,
will be
sure.
there.
Yeah, I would think they would be. Yeah.
And probably the chairman of the board will be there.
Right.
Oh, if Linda's the only one taking work off, that's okay.
Yeah, but
My
take
point
my
is, we're going to be
$90
doing it
take
all
my-
over anyways for the first one. Whether we have it tonight or have it in 5 weeks or 2 weeks, we're going to be doing it over again anyways.
The reality, and I can't guarantee this, but this is, when you have an establishment where a local licensing board is having multiple hearings over a short period of time, over 2 or 3 month period of time, often what the ABCC will do is they won't schedule appeal hearings, with the same distance apart as your hearings were. They'll put them all on the same date, and they'll either have them back to back or they'll combine them. They have the authority to do it. I've seen it done. And so the reality is The board is not sacrificing anything by waiting a week or 2 or 3 or even 4 or 5, because way out from now in the late summer or fall, when they have the appeal hearings, they're probably going to have the appeal hearing the same date as the one you had 2 weeks ago, is the hearing you're going to have in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 5 weeks, because it's going to be 3, 4, 5, 6 months from now. That's how clogged the system is. And in other words, the degree of toughness of this board with respect to enforcing liquor violations is not measured by the speed with which you conduct hearings. It is measured by the degree of the severity of the sanctions you impose when you make a finding that a violation exists. Keep that in mind. That's the important thing. And that we do it right so we get sustained when it goes to ABCC.
Okay. Any more discussion?
Nope.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 3 to 1. Paula. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Do we have?
Apologize.
Sorry for belaboring.
That's all right.
And that was for 7 o'clock on the 17th?
7:05.
7:05, I said, yeah. Subject to those 2 conditions.
The budget update, Kevin?
Yes, ma'am. Where's the board? The board has asked for a second budget. The budget that you've passed at this point, which has been passed by the school committee and the advisory committee as well, is identical. Everyone is now on the same sheet of music, assuming passage of the meals tax. The board asked for an alternative budget to be proposed, which assumes that the meals tax is not approved. The result of that would be a $300,000 reduction because, as you recall, the plan currently is to pass the meals tax, use that to fund the $300,000 OPEB currently in the budget, and so without the meals tax, we'd have to fund OPEB, which means the budget would have to be $300,000 less. So we've prepared a plan, and I'd like to go through that with you, and there's copies for the public. Thanks. So again, the total reduction that would be required to be $300,000, $210,000 for the school, $90,000 for municipal, and I would propose the following. First, we eliminate the HR director. That's a salary reduction of $86,000. That position would also has $14,000 in benefits associated. The biggest one, of course, is health insurance. Now we would have to add back $40,000 into the Labor Council budget that, as you recall, I've been saying 50. I went through it in detail with Labor Council the past 4 or 5 years, and I think we could be all right with 40. There's a little bit of a gamble there, but I think we're okay. We need to add back the $30,000 that we took as a credit. You recall, I was going to assign the HR director to run the Maya benefits project. I forget the name of the thing, but the project where we get credits.
Right.
So that's $30,000 in revenue that we wouldn't realize. So the net savings of eliminating the HR director is $30,537 toward that $90,000 goal. Next would be to take the $20,000 that I had recommended to you for records preservation in the town clerk's budget, cut it in half. That saves 10. Cumulatively, that saves 40,000 altogether. I called the library and the Council on Aging and said to them, we're going to have a cut in both of those departments. We've had cuts in Town Hall. We've had cuts in DPW. Remember, in DPW, we've had a clerical position eliminated by layoff and another position eliminated by attrition, a laborer position. The board indicated you would not support a reduction in public safety, so I stayed away from police and fire. So that really only leaves a couple other places to go. So the reduction that I would recommend in the library would be a part-time position and a reduction in hours of the pages. There's not much in the way of benefits associated with those positions because they're all part-time. Unemployment, because these would be actual layoffs. Now remember, it doesn't matter whether you eliminate a position wholly or you reduce the hours, the person affected can still file unemployment for the partial loss of income or the entire loss. So we have to add back about $11,869 in unemployment. So the net savings of eliminating those library positions is $18,512. In the Council on Aging, we would eliminate a part-time position and reduce hours for the van drivers. That would save $24,387. Those are one of those is a benefited position, again, primarily health insurance. That's a savings and benefits of $16,000. But we would have to add back in $9,600 for unemployment. So that's a net savings in Council on Aging of $30,950. That makes the reduction $90,000, exactly what we need. And that is the plan I would recommend to you. With the caveat, and I said this last week, and I want to say it again, I don't believe that there is any altering of this plan once the board adopts it. You don't have to adopt it tonight, but whether you do it tonight or next week, it's got to get a week after. It's got to get adopted prior to town meeting. Once it's adopted, I think we have to say to town meeting, we mean business. If the meals tax is not approved, we are going to make these cuts in the budget. We are going to lay these employees off and make these reductions in program. I don't think, even if the state said we're going to give you $100,000 more state aid, I think you just have to let it go into free cash because our credibility is on the line here. We need to be able to say to the public, it's Plan A or Plan B, and there's not going to be any backing off Plan B. This is what we're going to do if the meals tax doesn't pass. I think that's critical because we're going to have these budget shortfalls every year. They're not going away anytime soon. Even with the meals tax, they're not going to go away. We're going to have one next year. We need to be able to say to the public, here's a plan, here's an alternative plan, and we need to have them trust us, that our credibility is strong, we're honest, we're saying here's what we're going to do, and if they say, okay, do it, then by goodness we do it. So I can't emphasize enough, please consider this plan carefully. If you don't like it, tell me what you don't like. I'll tweak it, do something different, whatever meets your pleasure. This is my recommendation. The one thing I need the board to understand is that if I can't make a cut in public safety, that's 50% of the budget that I can't touch. I don't think it's practical to make any more cuts in public works because before this, we already had a deficit, which we had to close, and I've already cut 2 positions in DPW, one by layoff and one by attrition. So I don't think I can go there anymore. So that means that only 25% of the municipal budget is left. That's Town Hall, Council on Aging, and Library. So wherever I make the cut, it's going to be painful because Council on Aging, Library, and Town Hall don't have a lot of staff between all of them combined, and we're talking about cutting basically 3 positions or parts of more positions. It's painful no matter how I do it. Okay.
So you don't need a vote on anything tonight? We can.
You don't have to vote it tonight, but I would appreciate some feedback, whether it happens tonight or you drop me an email or you send me a voicemail or you give me a call and say, let's chat, or we get a cup of coffee just so you can tell me, am I on the right track here, folks, or do I need to do something different with this?
And did AdCom, I'm sorry, Linda, I didn't mean to.
No, go ahead.
AdCom will see this tomorrow night.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, and the school indicated today, the superintendent, Randy, you want to, because you talked to the superintendent directly and I didn't, and I don't want to mess up the message.
I speak with Chris, I spoke with Paul Jackson. So that they would just, if the meals tax didn't pass, they would just to reduce reduce their budget by $210,000. The one line.
One line. Okay, and now we have to have the discussion on the pre-65 retiree share of the health benefits.
Yeah, the board asked for the form of the motion in order to take that action to, and it would be as follows. This came straight from Labor Council.
Mhm.
I move that the town's contribution to the premium cost of retiree HMOs will be reduced to 60% of the premium cost effective July 1, 2011, and 50% of the premium cost effective July 1st, 2012, subject to the town meeting any bargaining obligation under Mass General Law, Chapter 150E. Not clear right now if we have a bargaining obligation or not, but we want to have it covered in case we do. And that is what he recommends as the form of the motion, and that is the 2-year phase-in plan where it drops from 70 to 60 on July 1 of this year, 60 to 50 on July 1 of next year.
And this particular one has gone through the AdCom, even though it's not their call.
AdCom has voted their support. Yeah, they didn't. There really isn't an article that the AdCom needs to vote. I asked if they would please consider giving you a vote of support on the 3 critical actions you took, which was the meals tax, and they voted to support that, on the pre-65 retirees contributory share reduction. I believe they voted you 13-1 to support that one. And the third one was the copay change, and I think, again, it was a 13-1 on that one also. So they voted to support you on all 3, even though they didn't need to, and that's much appreciated, as I said.
The AdCom deals with money, so we really had no role.
Sure. Yeah.
The straw vote in giving you the support we felt we should have.
And I think the one was not a negative. I think it was abstaining. Yeah.
That's the actual motion.
Okay, so that's a motion, and it needs to be seconded.
Please.
Well, who's gonna? I'll just say it's so moved, and then someone needs to second it. That's all. Do you want to second it?
No.
Okay, you don't want to second it. Elaine.
Second.
Discussion. Paul.
We talked about it enough already. No
Okay.
need to belabor.
All right. I just wanted to state that we brought this up last year. So my feeling is that we've given folks a warning last year, and it's getting phased in over the next 2 years. So there's been almost a 3-year phase-in of this part. And I know it's tough. It's hard, but it's got to stop somewhere, and it can't just continue. So that's all I want to say on that. Lorraine?
I'm all set.
Jim?
All set.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? 3, 4, and 1 against. And now
Linda,
we go
were we
to
going to talk about
action.
Do we have to do something about the date of the town meeting, or no?
Thank you. The other issue under, it's not under anything particular, I guess budget, is that the board had voted last week to continue the town meeting the 23rd. Unfortunately, high school auditorium is not available the 23rd, which led us to consider how to, as an alternative date. The problem is that time of year, so close to graduation, that auditorium is in use constantly. So we gave it a little bit more thought, and here's the danger. We have a bylaw that requires the meeting to be opened on the night of May 9th at 7 p.m. The only legal way, some towns have a bylaw that says the Board of Selectmen is authorized to change the date. We don't have that. We were required to open the meeting on May 9th, the election on May 2nd, the town meeting on May 9th. So the only way you can postpone it is if a couple people go there. Typically, it's the moderator and the town clerk. They open the meeting. It does not require a quorum to adjourn the meeting. So they make a motion, record it, that the meeting is adjourned to the 23rd. Here's your problem. If 100 people show up, they're going to do business. Now, if the board has reported to the public that you're going to postpone, and 100 people show up, and they do business, because you can't prevent it, now you've got a scenario where we told the public don't show up, 100 people show up, it could be a special interest for any article in that warrant, and all of a sudden you get a special interest running the town meeting, and you got a whole bunch of very angry citizens who were told it wasn't going to happen. I think this is an extremely bad idea. The problem we were having, as you recall, was trying to get agreement on a budget, whether it was a budget that assumed passage of the meals tax or a budget that assumed non-passage of the meals tax. Well, a little bit quicker than I think anybody thought, it came together. And the AdCom voted, the school committee voted, and you voted last week. So we don't have the scenario any longer where you're not all together on something, and that is the budget assuming the meals tax. So you have the ability to publish a budget now, and I don't really see why we would accept the danger of postponing past May 9th.
I think at that meeting where we asked to postpone it, there was 5 or 6 AdCom members here, and they expressed concern. They wanted to go back and vet out. They didn't have time, and they were meeting on the Wednesday following our Tuesday. I went to that Wednesday meeting, and there was a lot of discussion, and I think they were comfortable. They made a lot of votes, and I don't think there's that anxiety anymore. Correct me if I'm wrong. You guys were there.
Let's see, but the vote was 8-6-1.
Mm-hmm.
Did indicate some uneasiness.
Yep.
The AdCom worked hard those 2 nights and stayed late and got the job done. And so I think, unless I'm mistaken, we can go on the 9th now in good conscience that, we've got a budget, it'll be published, and all you'll be saying at night is, if Article 4 doesn't pass, here's the budget we'll recommend instead. It's pretty simple, one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Do we need a motion, or at least somehow,
Yes.
I'm sure Frank will write an article.
It'll be nothing more than to rescind the motion to postpone the town meeting to the 23rd and go forward on May 9th. So
I'd make a motion, we rescind our earlier motion postponing town meeting and help Kevin.
and have the meeting conducted on May 9th.
We'll have the meeting conducted on.
And hopefully Frank will do like a front page story so everyone in town
May 9th.
will know it is going to be May 9th.
You got it, Polly?
Second.
Meeting to the 23rd it was.
Yeah, so the motion was to rescind that prior motion and to actually have the annual town meeting on May 9th.
And we'll get notice out to all board, committee, commissions, and departments.
Seconded by Lorraine. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
4-0, Pauline. Okay. So, action items, Kevin?
You've got 5 action items. The first one is just a notice that the Household Hazardous Waste Day will be held on May 7th from 9 a.m. to noon at the Highway Garage. Always a well-attended event, as the board knows.
Yep.
You have a Labor Council bill, which I recommend to you. Well, I don't recommend happily, but because we're spending money at a fantastic rate with Labor Council this year, but it is certainly legitimate. I've gone through it.
Do you want a motion for
Yes,
that now? Motion to approve the payment, Labor Council's bill dated April 4th, 2011.
Second.
Any other discussion?
There's a couple of things on here on the, or at least the Health Department conflict. Is that done now? Are we expecting any more bills from that?
It is done. Randy is none of them. He stepped out. It is done. I'm pretty sure paid, and I don't physically have in my possession a signed release, but I'm told it's on the way.
Okay.
And I won't say anything more publicly because I don't know what the final release said, if it was to be held forever in secret, or whether the details can be released, and we certainly don't want to make any mistakes in that regard.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
4-0, Colleen. And there's a request for a one-day beer and wine license for Vita Tracks at the Orpheum for April 30th.
Motion to approve the request from Bay Colony.
Second?
Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. 4-0, Colleen. Next, we have a request for permission for the Sharon Triathlon route to pass through Foxborough on Willow Street and East Street on August 14th.
And I see Chief O'Leary give his
Yeah.
signature, so I would make a motion to approve that request.
Second?
Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. 4-0, Pauline. And next is the annual dues for the Selectmen's Association.
$75.
$25.
Actually, you don't really have
We
to
don't.
approve that. We just pay
Yeah,
it.
it just happens. And Kevin, I got a call last night about Mr. Blomberg's passing, and did Bob Bodie speak to you today at all about?
No, he probably wouldn't have got the chance, unfortunately. I was in back-to-back all day long. I was even late for the board meeting.
Yeah, he passed on, and he was trying to be proactive and get a letter up to you to try to get someone to Valerie to cover his portion of, I think he's up in June for a member of the Concom.
Okay.
But if he didn't put the letter in, we won't worry about it till next time.
If he did, it didn't get to me.
Okay.
So,
All right.
I mean, if you were sure that he was going to, you could certainly appoint him. That's, oh, no, you can't. It's not on the agenda. I'm sorry.
We don't have it on the agenda. I was just wondering if
No, you can't.
he got that to you, but.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll come in tomorrow, but we'll get it on the next agenda for you.
Okay. All right, and that's all we have then. I entertain a motion to exit into executive session.
Motion to exit into executive session in order to discuss real property negotiations and review of executive session minutes, and then to exit only to adjourn thereafter.
Okay. It hasn't been seconded yet, so go ahead, George.
I am sorry to be coming
Yeah.
so many times
Yeah.
tonight. I'm a little flabbergasted that at this point in time, the town warrant, the insertion of items in the town warrant have been discussed very lightly, and nothing has been inserted. So I don't know how we can print a town warrant when the board has not even voted on it.
Yeah, you voted last week the contents of the warrant.
No, they did not. I was here.
I
I refute that statement.
don't mean to be discourteous, but it's in your minutes. You went through the articles, you took one motion and included them all.
Yeah, we didn't discuss them, but.
Discuss nothing.
No, we didn't discuss them yet. I think that's on for the 26th, isn't it?
George may
Whether
not.
we're in favor or not.
George may not be familiar with the process. Typically, the board on one night will vote. All the articles are submitted by the departments. The board will say yes or no,
Right.
and say they're included or they're not.
Yeah.
And for instance, you routinely take articles out and say no, not this year or whatever. On a separate night, you come back, you go through the warrant and take positions on them.
Right.
Last week, you took a vote to include the draft, all the articles that were in the draft warrant. And subsequent to that, on the 26th, you'll start taking positions on them. So maybe there's just some confusion, George, about how their process works.
Well, the draft warrant has been replaced by this one. You have destroyed the draft warrant because this has been replaced. This has not been talked about by the selectmen. They talked about the draft.
We had a discussion 2 weeks ago, no, last week, about the warrant itself.
Right.
And I remember specifically, George, I remember Larry asking some questions, Paul asking some questions. No, I mean, I just, and there will be more discussion on each individual article, whether we support it or we don't support it. That's on our agenda for next week. The 26th, that's why we're saying,
I just feel it's misleading to the public.
okay, I just tried to clear it up, that.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yep, go ahead. So it hasn't been seconded yet.
Second.
Okay. Roll call. Lorraine?
Yes.
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
And the chair, yes. So, night, and thank you.